meeting to order. It's 5 o'clock. And we will have a quick roll call. Trustee Khan.
Here.
Trustee Andrews here. Trustee Capel.
Here.
Trustee Clark.
Here.
And Gwen McMullen is out tonight, so excused absence. So before we retire into what we believe will be a pretty quick closed session for the board, this is a time for any comments from the audience regarding the closed session that we'll be going into. So is there anything? Okay. Then I would like to have us head in a closed session. Under the Rosenberg rules, does that require a vote or anything like that? Okay, good. So we will go into closed session here at 5:02 and be back as soon as we can. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to gavel us back into session here at 5:22 and report on our activity in closed session on a motion made by Katie Clark and seconded by Jason Capel. The board voted unanimously, but with Gwen not voting tonight because she's not in attendance, to appoint Nikki Winslow as the new director of the Altadena Library District. And at this time, I'd like to yield the floor to Betsy Kahn, who was the chairperson of the Executive Search Committee, for a few words.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Betsy.
We are so thrilled. And I'm going to pass the mic to Nikki in a minute and let her give us a little bit about herself. But before I do that, while I still have your attention, I just want to say a few thanks. And the first was from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure on behalf of the whole board, I really have to give a big thank you to the staff for how patient and full of forbearance and perseverance and just class you've all been as we've worked our way through this long process. Of course, Cindy, who has guided us every step of the way, has been just such a gift to this district, and we appreciate her so much. I think I can say on behalf of Gwen, even though she's not here to vote, that if she were here, it would be an actual unanimous vote, but it's definitely a unanimous vote in spirit. She's been with us through this whole process. Terry, as my search committee member, it was a lot of work along the way, and we're just so thrilled with the outcome. Lastly, even though the chairs are mostly empty, our community has been so patient, and it's been rough. It's been a long process, and I just, as I'm at it like a year and a half of being here, and it's just so, I'm just so grateful to reach this moment. So I'm going to pass the mic. Oh, before I do, I'm just going to say a little bit about Nikki. She comes to us from Glendale Public Library. She's been there for 2.5 years as their assistant director. Before she was at Glendale, she managed a very large branch of the Las Vegas Clark County Library System, and she is currently the chair of the California Library Association Conference, which I guess you're probably just not sleeping right now. That may be how that's working. That's a huge job coming up at the end of October. So we're certainly thrilled that will be known at the California Library Association Conference that we snagged Nikki as our director. She's married, has 3 children, and if you are ever up at Farnsworth Park at the tennis courts, you might see her hitting the ball around because she's a big tennis buff. So I'm going to pass it on over to her and let her say a few words. We're just not sure how to make this mic turn on. Oh, Jonathan, you're here.
Yes.
Jonathan,
you're here.
No, of course you're here, but when I test it.
It's like when you call IT and they're like, is it plugged in? Oh, whoops. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Good evening, Chair Andrews, trustees, staff, and members of the community. I'll although I can't differentiate who is who at this point yet, but as I mentioned, my name is Nikki Winslow. I am the Assistant Director in Glendale, and I am so excited to be here this evening. I'm thankful to the board for your confidence and your appointment, and I look forward to working and collaborating with all of the Altadena staff, the board, and not most importantly, but really the community to establish what we're going to do moving forward. Reading through the board package, 156 pages of it, there's a lot of amazing things that are being done in Altadena right now, and it looks like a lot more in the works. And I'm really excited to come on board and join this team in the adventure and help carry things forward. I love living in Southern California. Like they mentioned, I've been here 2.5 years. My middle child just moved here and is going to college in Pasadena. So this is Caitlin. She's here with me tonight. So again, thank you so much, and I'm really excited about this job. We're going to have a lot of fun together because that's what my work is. It's fun. Okay, thank you.
All right, that's wonderful news for all of us. Welcome, Nikki. Now we are on to our open session. And the first thing is the approval of the agenda items. Yeah. So do I have a motion then to approve that, or anybody like to change it?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All right, and that motion carries. Also, the adoption of the agenda.
Terry, I don't.
I'm sorry. We need to take one thing off of the agenda, and that is number 9D, review and approval of investment policy.
9B, did you say?
D. And these are, yeah, the lettering on 9 is a little askew.
It's postponed.
Okay, so we've got that change.
So which ones are you taking off? Because it does have B and C twice.
Review and approval of investment policy, D.
Which should be F.
Well, while we're at it, should we just
Yeah.
re-letter that section so when we get there, we know what we're talking about?
So there's only one real D on there, that's what we're taking off, right? Okay. Now, this is something we're just delaying, we're tabling this until the next
Yeah,
meeting, is
it's
that
under
right?
review by BB&K, we just haven't gotten it back yet.
Okay, gotcha.
And sorry, did we say we were gonna not do the resolution on Rosenberg tonight?
Yeah, that's my next.
So,
comment.
yeah,
I'm
so let's
sorry,
fix that, sorry.
I was so excited about Nikki, I wasn't paying attention to where you were on the agenda. Yeah, there are two things on here where you are not going to have a resolution. One is 8C, review and approval of the electronic communications retention policy. And the other one is
The
Rosenberg. So 9C, the review and approval of resolution for Rosenberg's Rules of Order.
So that's just gonna be a discussion.
It'll be approval of the actual adoption of the rules, but then we're gonna bring it back next month to incorporate into the policies.
But the electronic communication policy will just be a motion to adopt the policy. I don't think we're.
Well, it may also come back as a resolution. Isaac was debating that as we were preparing the agenda.
So we won't table that until the next meeting?
Yeah,
We'll have
no.
an action on that, okay?
Right. It's just the resolution is not part of it.
Okay. But we will postpone or table 8B and 8D.
No.
I'm sorry, 9D, right?
The only one we're taking off the agenda is 9D, also known as F.
The investment policy thing is off.
And that's the one that's awaiting BBK's review.
Okay. That's a complex motion. I'm glad I
So
did that.
given all of that,
I'll rescind my initial motion
My apologies.
and make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
second.
Okay.
Check that.
Terry, before you vote, can I ask a
Yes,
The 9A, are we going to see the contract before it's actually, we get to that point so we can look at it? Before 9A?
There is a copy or the.
I saw Cindy's.
Took it.
Oh, is the
There's
other one there?
two.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's all.
Bridget, did you take my public inspection copy?
No, I didn't. There were over there.
There's one here.
I
I'm
have
just
been
kidding.
known to do that. I did not.
There's another one.
I had an extra
There's
copy if
several.
you need longer.
You can have this, I'm not gonna read it.
I'm glad we won back trust.
I'm not reading that. All right,
That's embarrassing. I didn't even say.
No, I
so
Okay.
let's re-vote on the agenda.
yeah, let's do, we're gonna start with A then, again.
Yeah, we'll just
All
redo
right.
it.
So there is a motion to change the agenda items, or I guess it hasn't been made yet, right? Would someone like to make that?
Jason made it.
A motion to amend as recommended by our directors.
Okay, good.
Second.
Second, okay. Any discussion? Any more discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that carries. The adoption then of the agenda,
Move to adopt is so amended.
I'll second.
okay, no discussion? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. Now we come to a point for public comment on non-agenda items, and I have two forms here. One was actually here ahead of time, and I believe that 4C should be the place for Eugene Hutchins to speak on the Oliver Good Cell report. Please come to the microphone, Eugene, thank you. Eugene, I should explain to you also, if you don't know the rule, that this is a 3-minute segment that you have for this, okay?
Understood, thank you. Good evening, I'm Eugene Hutchins. I'm a resident of Altadena. 2020 marks the 10-year anniversary of the passing of Lieutenant Oliver Goodall. He lived in the house I currently reside for more than 50 years. Over the course of his life, Lieutenant Goodall made a powerful impact in his adopted community of Altadena and elevating the dignity and civil rights of African Americans in this country. As a World War II officer and Tuskegee Airman, Lieutenant Goodall joined his fellow officers by participating in the Freeman Field Mutiny. The Freeman Field Mutiny was a series of incidents at Freeman Army Airfield near Seymour, Indiana in 1945, in which African American members of the 477th Bombardment Group attempted to integrate an all-white officers club. In conjunction with Black History Month, a group of local community members under the name of the Oliver Goodall Project will be honoring and paying tribute to Lieutenant Goodall and the Tuskegee Airmen with a permanent plaque on the private property of his former residence. Among the local Altadena organizations that we're looking to find support include the Rotary Club, Altadena Heritage, the Altadena Library, the Tuskegee Airmen LA Chapter, the African American Museum of Beginnings in Pomona. Russ Figa of the Altadena Community Chest has already made commitments to make a contribution to this project, and we're seeking more. The project is being organized by a committee of local residents, including myself, Corrine Grant, Fran Brooks, Town Council members Veronica Jones and Gloria Stack. Mark Renesco has also stepped up to help us gain support from a variety of other local community groups, such as the Rotary and various civic-minded citizens. The event and unveiling of the monument will be held outdoors on Sunday, February 16th at 2 p.m. at 679 West Harriet Street. Today, I'm here simply to inform the Altadena Library District Board of Trustees of this event and encourage your support and recognition of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. And it's a word of advice, if you haven't done it already, we do have a community calendar on which you can list this.
It's already listed.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I should say, we can put this in my trustee report, but just so it's here when Eugene is here. Eugene and I have been able to meet, and we've been having some conversations also in conjunction with some of the oral history work that we've been doing here at the library, and ways to integrate some of that programming and just sort of wrap it all together as part of our larger project on civil rights and hearing voices that maybe have not been heard in Altadena before. So we've been in contact and conversation, and I am sure that will continue as we develop this plan over the coming months.
All right, thanks. All right, Mark, you're next.
Mark Mariscal. As president of the Rotary Club of Altadena, I will, you know, when Eugene talked about Corinne, so Corinne is sitting next to him. She and her husband actually run the Altadena Community Garden. He's the president of the board there, so very active in the community. So I just want to say that although he wants it on the calendar and those kind of things, I think there's some kind of a nexus, and I brought it up at the Library Foundation board meeting we had last week, with the idea that maybe somehow the Altadena Library Foundation gets involved. If the library thinks it can be mixed in with Black History Month, you know, those kind of things. I think there's a good mix there, so I want to encourage that. Another reason I'm up here is October 19th, we have now set the date, and the tickets will be available probably after tomorrow. The flyer's done, but the Altadena Sheriff Station, the Rotary Club is again helping them with pancake breakfast. So we did one in May, we're doing another one community-wide. So for all the people listening on YouTube on this thing later on, please come out to Grocery Outlet on October 19th from 8 in the morning to 10:30. The tickets are $5. Jonathan was the person who bought the first ticket last time, so I know I'm going to get his $5 before we even have a ticket printed. So I'll get his $5 tonight, I'm sure, so he could be first again, and maybe he'll show up and actually eat the breakfast this time with that. And then...
No pressure.
No pressure. And then I will say that it is really nice to come to this meeting and not have you know, it's one thing to have a good community group here, but it's also nice sometimes. I know you guys have been a little lonely without having too much public here in the last 1 or 2 meetings, but you know, it is nice to come in and not have some people who still are frustrated maybe with a system, and I'm glad that really the last few months have been calm for you, because you guys have done a lot of work. And one note, because I'm not going to say it during the strategic plan part, but having that in the agenda, or having that as part of the package, the first part of what she's done so far, I thought was really nice. It gives people an opportunity to read it. I only read through very quickly, and I'm going to go back and read it again a little closer, but it is really nice that we're moving forward on that. So thank you to all of you trustees, and hopefully we see you all. I think you're out of town, but I think we're seeing the 3 of you. Are you here on Saturday?
This Saturday?
Yeah, for the Taste of Dena?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. So I think we're going to see all 5 trustees at the Taste of Dena. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, the next item is the approval of the consent calendar.
So I know in recent practice, we've had a motion and a second to approve, and then we chat a little bit about it. So that being the case, I will move that we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Okay, great. Okay, is there any discussion then about the items in the consent calendar?
My first comment, I know a couple of meetings ago, I think several of us spoke, enjoying the recognition of seeing some of our staff that are continuing to further their careers. And so it's great to see, as small as our group is here, to see another staff person moving forward with their career. Under the technical services report, Mark starting his effort to work towards his MLSs. So it's just good to see that. I think it says a lot about where we're at, to see that kind of support.
And I'd just like to give a quick shout out to Stella and her public services report, because we've had a number of interviews for new positions, and that has been probably a pretty demanding schedule to get all of those accomplished with everything else that is going on currently at the library. But it's exciting to see that we're continuing to, bring good people on board, and it just, I think, speaks also to the quality of our staff, that everything keeps rolling when we have so many changes happening at the same time. So thank you for that.
I'd like to say, I'm just so happy to see Isabel's report as our new teen services person. But the part that I put a star and an exclamation point next to in my packet was the community conversations at schools that she's launching. I'm just so excited to hear that, you know, she'll be in conversation with our education community, and even just walking through the door this afternoon on the announcement boards, like teen this, teen that, teen this, teen that. She has really hit the ground running, and I think many of you know I facilitate a professional book group for young adult and children's librarians that meets at, well, we're kind of homeless right now. We've been meeting at Pasadena Public Library, and just like here, their meeting room is always booked. So last month we met at Pete's Coffee, and we just get together and talk about, you know, books that we're reading and how we would recommend them and who we would recommend them to. And Isabel fully intended to come to our last meeting. She couldn't make it this last time, but she's going to be joining us along with Amanda, who comes every time and is such a valuable member. So I just feel like that's been a little dormant for a little while. Amanda's been holding it together, and it's just so exciting to see new life being breathed into the teen program.
And I have a comment on Amanda Toledo's report. I come from the world of business, and this is a report that we would never have seen in that world. And it's pretty simple. It's the first paragraph. And she talked about a large sign up for kids for the summer reading program, but only 103 kids completed it. And really what sounds like, well, you could interpret that as maybe a small failure. I'm not sure how you interpret it here, but I think it's terrific that someone can comment on a goal that may not have been reached and what they may have learned from it and so on. And if there's anything in these sets of documents that I would point to, it would be that sense of trust that someone could come out and tell it like it is and learn from their experiences and so on. And I just hope to see that characteristic carried forward in the library in the future. All right, any other discussion? Okay, with that, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The consent calendar is now approved. Losing my place here, hang on. What's the next?
Support group reports.
Support group reports, I'm sorry. So I suddenly can't find my, there we go, sorry. So the next thing then would be the reports of the supports groups, and we'll start out with the Altadena Library Foundation. It's Bridget. Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you. Notice I have no notes. I don't have that much to say. But first and foremost, I want to welcome you as our new librarian. And you know, Betsy, when you said it's just been a long, long time, I just feel like it's, of course I'm on this side of the process, but I am still pleasantly surprised that it happened as quickly as it did. I kept thinking, yeah, sure, it's not going to be October, it'll be January. So I'm thrilled, and I want you to know that the foundation appreciates all the work you're doing, and we'll put you to work soon. The most important thing, of course, is the Altadena Foundation Taste of Dena Saturday night. Be there, be square. The other thing is we're really excited. We're having our annual planning retreat November 9th, and Margaret Sullivan has agreed to be our facilitator for that. So we're really excited that we can work sort of hand in glove with the strategic plan that you've been creating. So thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. All right, next is Friends of the Library, Mark Mariscal.
Mark Mariscal, immediate past president of the Friends of the Altadena Library, celebrating 60 years. I was trying to do the calculation because the Rotary is 70 years this year, and the foundation is 10 years this year. See, and I don't think any of you are 10, 60, or 70. The exact age. That's I say it that way. All of you are 29 and below. The Friends, and I don't know what's in Cindy's report, although I saw the written part, and I don't know if you were gonna say this, but the Friends just finished voting on a motion to add another $7,800 to the contributions for this year based on requests the staff made through Cindy. And so I think that brings it up to like $33,000, $34,000, I think the commitment is for this year, right? Somewhere around there.
Probably.
Yeah. But you know, very specific things that they asked for, and I think that was really nice. One of the things Cindy did say to the Friends group a few months back was she wanted, when the budget was being put together, she wanted to be very specific for it. You know, we tried the last 2 years to kind of earmark it to specific programs, where 3 years ago it was just, you know, the request was just give us the $30,000 and we'll figure out what to do with it, kind of thing. So I think it's really evolved to where when we get to next March or April, I'm sure that the library staff working through the director, Nikki, will then present to both the foundation and the Friends with that. The book sale was very successful. I think they did not, seriously, when we're talking about it, doing 3 two-day book sales is a lot, but I think I read that Joy wrote, she's the vice president, that the $4,800 on that Saturday, at least for the last 5 to 10 years, was the most in any of the book sales that it brought in over the last 10 years. So I think that was really nice for a one day. And then overall, I think they did, and Granny's here, but I think it was like 5,600. I don't remember what the exact number was overall, but it was a good number. So anyway, they were happy with that, and then the next time there's a book sale, it's going to be in conjunction with Christmas Tree Lane. And so I will tell you that the Friends have worked with Christmas Tree Lane for many, many years, over the years. And so it's nice to see you have the MOU on the agenda. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All right, next is the district director's report.
Okay, as was mentioned, we have been, Stella and Amanda and I have been involved in interviews for 4 positions, library manager positions, adult services and youth services, a library associate for children's room, and a library page for the main library. And we are very close to making 3 of the 4 positions filled. As you know, as was mentioned, California Library Association, under the able direction of Nikki, will be October 24th through the 27th, and we have a great turnout with at least, 20 staff going to at least one day of the conference, and then of course 3 of you will be attending as well. We were very fortunate too, I think it was the first time ever that they had scholarships with CLA, and 6 of our support staff, our non-librarian credentialed staff, were accepted as recipients of that, so we're really happy about that. This will be talked about later, but the staff has been very involved in directed storytelling, one-on-one conversations with some of our patrons that then culminated in a 2-day workshop. As you know, we closed on Thursday and Friday of last week. It was an incredibly successful day, so a lot of good things coming from that. And in our effort to continually train or update people's professional skills, Jonathan Arevalo will be attending a conference in Dublin, Ohio, focused on library building projects, and that's well timed with our work about to begin with Architectural Resources Group. It's presented by the Buildings and Equipment Community of Practice of the Library Leadership and Management Association, which is a division of the American Library Association. The 2 days or 3 days will include tours of local Ohio libraries, academic and public libraries. And the really interesting thing is, we didn't realize this until after he signed up, Margaret Sullivan is one of the speakers. So all sorts of connections. And then also Christopher Kellmeyer will be attending the Internet Librarian. And when I was in Glendale, I think we sent somebody to this pretty much every year, and it was a really great opportunity to hear about new and emerging technologies. So I know Christopher will benefit from that. That's in Monterey this year, and it's actually always in Monterey. The really fun news that's not in the written report is Diana from Bob Lucas had a baby girl. And we learned about it, and it's the little girl's name, I'm not sure. Charlotte, that's right, we all thought Charlotte's Web, that's great. But we all learned this in the middle of one of our workshops with Margaret, so it was a very nice way to celebrate. And I think the baby was born, and 2 minutes later, we had a picture. And finally, this is not on the report either, but we've had several people express concern about the library, more than several probably, about the library and the fact that we are a very noisy space. And everybody that's presented their perspective always preface this with, I understand libraries are changing, which I think is really important that people are recognizing that, and that you need, you know, more active spaces than your traditional library. But anyway, we wanted to somehow try to mitigate the issue, especially related to tutors using the library, because tutors need to be noisy. But some of the issues were kind of centered at tutoring in the library. So what we've done is we've created some quiet zones in the library. You'll notice behind the stacks in the main room are some signs very creatively created. The quiet zone, kind of a takeoff on the Twilight Zone with the font that's used, and then table signage asking tutors to please go to the desk, ask for other opportunities for tutoring. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this room during certain hours during the week, so tutors can come in here and tutor. It'll be a group experience, but at least they'll have that opportunity. Or rent the space if they want dedicated time. Chloe did all this in an amazingly short amount of time. But we also have a website dedicated to tutors and how we can best service them. So long story short, I think it's important to try to, as best we can, meet the needs of all of our customers. You know, and it is true, people want quiet in a library, and so I hope that by creating this zone that will help with some of the people that want quieter spaces, while at the same time still having a lively academic or dynamic space for things like the Fab Lab and the teen space and tutoring in other sections of the library. So I just wanted to let you know that. Oh, you can also, if anybody's interested, you can go to our website, altadena.libraries.org/tutor and or tutors, and it will give you all this information. So I think that's it.
Cindy, before you move on from that, I'm just trying to picture noisy tutoring. Do you mean like a tutor sitting with a student are
Or one tutor
speaking so
sitting-
loudly that they're bothering people? Never
Yeah,
mind.
or one tutor sitting with 5 students.
Oh, so it's group tutoring.
And,
Okay.
you know, we do, like I said, we want to accommodate this, but it is disruptive for the people that are trying to study and get a little
Yeah,
quiet
that's
time.
almost more like a little class. Yeah, got it, okay.
Oh, and finally, I will be on vacation starting on Wednesday, planned long before I knew I was going to be here, as long as I have been, through Monday, or I'll be back on Monday, October 6th, and Stella will be in charge in my absence.
All right, thanks, Cindy. And next we have Stella Terrazas to talk about the library collection.
And actually, I needed to preface that with something that wasn't in the board packet, but you did receive on your desk, and there's some available at the table over there for the public, a list of statistics, cumulative statistics. Over the months that I've been here, I think all of you at one point or another have asked me for kind of a snapshot of where we have been over the years. And so that led to a discussion with Stella about the collection and how the collection impacts all of these things, our visitors, our circulation, our programs, and you know, how things have changed over the years. Especially, and I had a gentleman last month that talked about our collection size. And I know it is of concern to people about how many books we have and how we're servicing the community. So this statistical sheet is kind of a preface to what Stella's going to talk about in terms of how we manage our collections and how it has an impact on our service.
So good evening. I would like to take a moment and thank the board for all of your hard work on hiring our new director And I want to say welcome to Nikki, and I also want to say thank you to Cindy for all the work that she's done over the course of this year. So, thank you. So, collection development. What I'm going to do tonight is just talk to you a little bit about how we get materials into the collection, and then also how and why we remove materials out of the collection. And I know, Betsy, you probably know all this already.
Waiting.
So I'm calling this collection development a mini crash course on the topic. So steps to begin acquiring materials. First of all, we have a budget, and I know the board is quite familiar with our budget. But within the budget for materials, it gets broken down into material types, and then, for example, when we're ordering books, that gets further broken down amongst our library selectors and in our catalog and in our acquisition system. We have further breakouts that are divided amongst the collection development budget. We also need selectors. So I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment, but selectors are the folks who actually read the reviews and bring the materials into the library. Another part of acquiring materials is thinking about the ethics behind what we're doing. So we look to the American Library Association Code of Ethics, which should also drive all of our processes here in our day-to-day work here at the library. We also have a collection development policy, which will probably be revised sometime in the next few months. So get ready. And then what's really important to remember is that objectivity should always override subjectivity. So what I try to tell the selectors is you may be really passionate about one particular author, but you have to remember you're buying for the community, and it's not just about what Stella likes or so-and-so likes. So collection responsibility. So depending upon the library type, there's different models of selection. So for example, academic libraries have a different model than what we have here. And even within public library systems, larger library system may have what's called more of a central model, where they may have one team that does all the selection for the entire library system. Here at our library here, we have our branch manager who selects for Bob Lucas. We have a teen librarian who selects for teens. We have a children's librarian who selects for children's. At some point we could look at that and decide that the teen librarian would select for both locations. There's lots of different things you can do in terms of how you go about selecting and assigning responsibility for selection. So this year's selectors. We have Diana, who, as we just said, is currently out on maternity leave. She did leave us with several carts of materials to get us through December, so I thank her in advance for that. When she comes back, she'll continue on selecting for Bob Lucas for the spring. We have Carlene Chu, who is our technical services manager. However, while Diana is on maternity leave, Carlene is actually the acting branch manager at the moment. But Carlene selects several areas for our adult collection here at the main Mariposa location. We have Mark Parsons. He primarily selects our graphic novels and science fiction. This year I'm also challenging him a little bit and giving him a nonfiction area to start selecting and to help build his skills as a future librarian. We have Helen Milner. Helen is going to be selecting our adult mystery. Isabel will select the teen materials. Oops, and I went a little fast, oh well. And Amanda, she has been selecting Spanish materials for children's, and so I imagine once we have our new manager that will continue. I also do a bit of selection. And then not seen here is our future children's and family services manager and our future adult services manager. They will also have some areas of responsibility. So how do you decide what to select? Well, we use professional journals. So we use things like school library journal, book list, library journal. There's various professional resources out there. We look at professional reviews. So for example, the Reference User Services Association of ALA has various awards committees that do various reviewing of materials. There's the young adult library section, and then there's the adult library service, excuse me, not adult. There's the services to children. So there's all kinds of ALA groups that within their divisions have multiple awards committees and different committees that provide reviews of sources and lists. Then we also use bestseller lists. So for example, what's on the LA Times weekly list or the New York Times. There's sources that come through media. So I like NPR's Arts and Life section. They often tap into a lot of really great titles there. A librarian in Utah for many years has compiled a quarterly list of classical music, and so that's an area that's kind of harder to find, contemporary titles, and he does a great job. So the CD Hot List, Facing History and Ourselves, and these are just snippets. I mean, there's great sources out there. Here in LA, there's the Sisters in Crime, which lists, mystery titles. There's Fiction Genre Awards, so for example, the Bram Stoker Awards for horror, and Romance Writers of America. So there's lots of places that I encourage selectors to go and look for reviews so that we get the broadest depth of a collection available. And that's something I should also mention is, being a public library, we do tend to collect a broader general collection rather than, we're not an academic library or we're not a law library, so we're not delving into one particular area, but a broad breadth. So we use a variety of vendors to acquire materials. Sometimes we have to go to unique vendors. Maybe there's an off-topic book that we want to get, and so we just go find a website where that book may be available, or a DVD. Sometimes one is at a conference and there's great sales at conferences, and so sometimes you just have to go ahead and get the materials there. We do order it from Amazon. Right now, most of our video games come via Amazon. One of our other vendors does provide video games, and I'm going to be looking more and more into seeing if we can actually use that vendor instead of acquiring them through Amazon. And then for some of our large print, we use a couple of companies. One is called Cengage, and then there's also Centerpoint Large Print. We use Recorded Books to get our children's kits and some of our audiobooks. Ingram is one of the big materials vendors out there in the world, and we do acquire some materials from them. They are the vendor that is currently also offering video games, so like I said, I want to look more into what they might be able to provide us. Overdrive, we use Overdrive for our e-audiobooks and our e-books. And then our primary vendor is Baker & Taylor. And so with our materials that come from Baker & Taylor, we get them coming cataloged and processed, or what is called shelf ready. And this year, as we converted and migrated to RFID, we also worked extensively with them in making sure that our materials came tagged, what is called tagged and encoded and ready to be used with RFID. And of course, Christopher, our IT manager, has been a huge, huge help in that process. So, and also need to give a shout out to Vicki, who's sitting over there, because she also works extensively with Baker & Taylor and trying to sort out some problems with them. So aside from just choosing, individual titles, other methods of acquisitions that we use are some programs called standing orders and continuations. So for example, with some of the most popular authors, for example, your Danielle Still, your Stephen King, you can create an order that Baker & Taylor has where they know when Stephen King is releasing a new book. We don't even have to put it in a cart and order it, it gets automatically shipped to us. With children's materials, there's a variety of series, like the Captain Underpants series, for example. These are all in standing orders. so that the vendors know, oh, we want 2 copies of this author or 3 copies of this series, and that's just going to come to us automatically. We don't even have to think about it. Continuations is kind of a similar program for some of our nonfiction materials. So for example, the Nolo Press legal guides, we know we're going to want the new version every year, so those just come to us automatically. We set up profiles with the various vendors. And then of course our purchase suggestions. We really try to respond to what the community wants to read, to view, to listen to, and the number of our purchase suggestions continues to grow on a monthly basis. So Carlene is currently the librarian who really handles acquiring our purchase suggestions and going through. And occasionally there are some things that we have to tell the customer, I'm sorry, this is out of our price point, or this is just impossible to get, you know. But we do try and acquire as much as they ask for. Oops. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how and why we remove materials from the library. As Cindy mentioned, this has been a big topic of discussion here over the last few years. What I want to say is there's different words that can be used for this process. One is deselection, sometimes it's called deacquisition, discarding, or more commonly, weeding. So any of those words really means kind of the same thing, that you're taking the materials out of the library. Why do we call it weeding? Well, you know, I love nature, but as you can see, this is kind of an overgrown something or other, and you can't really tell what's behind it. Whereas if we look at this next photo, here's a nicely manicured lawn. You can see what's there. There's nothing hidden behind it. So weeding is kind of a term that people can understand. Whether you're a gardener or not, you get the sense of what it means to clear the weeds away and to make things nice. So why do we weed? Well, if you look at the photograph on the left, the shelves are really crammed. And there have been studies that have been found when you have shelves that are so impacted, it actually makes it harder for people to browse, and it makes it harder for them to find the items that they want to maybe even not realize are there, waiting for them. Whereas the picture on the right shows you that there's more display capability when you open up those shelves. So weeding is to make the collections more accessible. Here's an example of an item. You can see that at one point it got discarded. It was stamped discarded, but somehow it wound up back in the collection. So one of the things selectors need to do is constantly check. It's not just about looking at a computer report, it's by going onto the shelves and looking and seeing what's there. These are items that I found in the last couple of years. So on the left side, you can see these are some children's kits. They all have cassettes in them, whereas we were no longer collecting cassettes, and these were basically the only cassettes sitting in the collection. So that's a material type that we no longer have in the collection. So I weeded those out because they were 4 random items. Also on the right-hand corner is something called a playaway. And one time I was perusing the audiobook collection and I saw this one lone playaway just stuck in the middle of the audiobooks. So again, if you no longer have a general material type, you want to remove what is remaining, because you shouldn't just have one lone playaway sitting in the library collection. So another reason we weed is to eliminate duplication. If you can see, the title here is Charles Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle. That is a classic piece of classic work. But you can see there's 2 copies. We only need 1 copy. And so you have to kind of evaluate things sometimes and think about what is more appealing, what is more contemporary. So certainly the cover on the right is a little bit more reflective of what our current community might want to look at. Why do we weed? It's all about age. You want to keep the collection accessible to all by providing accurate information. And you want to provide a collection that is not a barrier to learning. So for example, making money with your computer at home. I don't recall what the publication date on this item was. You can see it was the second edition, but I can tell you it was extremely outdated in multiple ways and would not be of service to anybody who wants to make money at home with their computer. The Webster's Elementary Dictionary on the right came from our children's collection. One of the things you want to do when you evaluate a dictionary, one of the easiest ways to evaluate how old a dictionary is to open it up, and if you don't see the words internet or World Wide Web, you know that's a candidate for weeding. And that was the case with this Webster's Elementary Dictionary. We want to provide correct information. So the two books that are on the left are about stars and planets and summer stargazing. Both of them, it's not really visible on these images, but both of them have a 2010 expiration date on the cover. So again, these were not going to be useful to anybody who's wanting to go outside and stargaze tonight because they are greatly outdated. This book about the Bengal tiger. Well, I love tigers, but if I was browsing the shelves, this would not look attractive to me. I wouldn't be interested in reading it. And furthermore, the text on the bottom came from one of the pages in the book, and I'll read it to you. India has only 2,000 Bengal tigers left. Other Bengals live in Nepal, Bhutan, and Southeast Asia. At the rate it's being killed, the tiger will be extinct by the year 2000. I found this about a year and a half ago on our shelves, so.
And I saw 3 of them last year, so they're not extinct.
So there again, it's like, why do you weed? To make sure that you have appropriate information for students who are doing reports, for just people who want correct information. The Dinosaur Dictionary has a publication date of 1972. Again, this was on our shelves within the last year or so. There are certain standards that is used when weeding. So there's different groups out there, librarian groups, who have created standards for libraries. And one of the standard library practices is that paleontology, materials on paleontology ideally should not be more than 5 years old. So clearly this was, definitely out of date. Another reason we weed is just condition. This item here was a 1955 publication about Marie Antoinette. So there's a couple of things here. I'm pretty certain that since 1955 there has been more updated information and research about the life of Marie Antoinette. But number one, just, you can see that gross smudge on the cover, so it's kind of just disgusting, and then you can see that within the pages of the book there's some sort of stain, and it also smelled, and this is just not something I want to hand out to somebody to read. I want people to have nice, attractive materials, so we sometimes have to weed just for the condition of an item, and sometimes when you weed for condition, sometimes you go ahead and buy another replacement copy, or sometimes not. So this was really fun. This was a damaged book that was in our children's area, and you can kind of see there's kind of like construction paper cut out, and then there's tape. I can tell you that this is not how libraries mend materials. So clearly to me, this must have been some creative child who damaged the book and then figured out a way to mend it for themselves. I don't know, but that's what I'm guessing happened here. But there again, this just should not have been sitting on our shelves. We just don't want to hand that out to people. again, can't stress enough that we want to have correct, accurate information. So this was a biography on Cesar Chavez. You can see it had his birth date of 1927, no death date. However, this was sitting on our shelves and he had died 2 years after this 1991 publication, stating that he's still living. So again, you know, children doing reports and research, or even adults, we want to make sure that we have accurate information for them. So I can say that we now also have a biography database, so that is much more current, so that has also helped us in terms of keeping our biographies and information for children and teens. Cultural sensitivity is very important. So in the last year, Little House on the Prairie came under fire within various library groups because of the way that the Native American population was depicted, and there was all kinds of, you know, back and forth on internets and different lists about whether libraries should remove Little House on the Prairie. I think the general consensus has been it's such a classic, we should keep it, but then you want to kind of teach children who may read that book about, you know, how we treat people now, and what was written then is maybe not how we want to talk about people currently. So then up on the left we have Moi Moi by Leo Politi. This is an interesting case. Leo Politi, for those of you who maybe don't know, was he lived here in Los Angeles, and he was an author and illustrator of many children's books. He was beautiful illustrations. Most of his books were about Los Angeles and different populations that lived in Los Angeles. But Leo was a product of his time, and some of his illustrations depict people in certain stereotypical ways that we would not want to have that depiction now. So with our Leo Politi books, what we've decided to do is make them into a closed collection so that if somebody's looking to look at the art of Leo Politi, it's still available. Again, these are books about Los Angeles history. However, I don't really want children pulling these off the shelf and not being able to understand that these are certain stereotypical depictions that we do not want to perpetuate in this day and time. So that's another reason to read. All right, why else do you want to weed? Well, you want to create relevant information. So this was a really fun book. It's about kids going to the library, and the one person is saying they're talking about they're getting an LP and that they get to play it at home on their phonograph. Now I know LPs have come back into relevance, and I know some libraries are actually now circulating LPs again. However, as we go further in this book, you'll see how it's kind of a very aged book. You know, this kid wants to borrow the record, the LP, because he likes marching bands and parades. Then on the picture on the right, it's, you know, this is great. It's about going to the public library. But I don't know if you can really see the woman is using this old card file thing that we don't use anymore. And there was, back in the day, a special machine that would like punch cards. And so this is no relevance to a child of today. So while it might be a fun book for libraries for historical purposes, it's not really going to be of interest to a kid, so we removed it from the children's section. Why do we read? So we want to make space for underrepresented voices in the collection. Sometimes you might have a renovation or some other space constraint that requires weeding. And so the top photograph is from our 2017 renovation where shelves were removed, and then downstairs we had stacks and stacks of books that we had to process and discard from the collection. Sometimes you have to weed because you're migrating to a new ILS system, or you're doing an RFID conversion. So why do we weed? If we were never to lead, we would eventually be overrun by materials and we wouldn't be able to walk through the library. Some libraries sometimes want to keep a certain number of volumes per capita. That's not a good excuse. If you weed, you'll enable patrons to find materials. It ensures better visibility of the collections. Will create a more relevant collection. And one thing to remember is that every library is different, so every library is going to have their own criteria that is unique to them. And when we read, we use various data. We're going to be getting a product called Collection HQ, which will also look at just all kinds of statistical data. So there's various reports and different things you use to actually decide what to weed and when. And that's kind of it. Thank you.
So to Stella's point, I just want to point out in the statistics that you have in front of you that in 2018, we circulated 218,000 items with a collection size of about 80,000. In 2005, our circulation was 177,000, and we had a collection size of about 134. And I think over the years, libraries have tested the theory that if you have an updated collection, you're going to circulate more. And I think these statistics generally prove that point. And people's reading habits have changed. And our ability to get reference research has gone online with ebooks and e-resources for reference. Thank you, Stella.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I
Stella.
also really meant to preface my presentation with the fact that although I was using examples out of this library, in no way, shape, or form do I mean to admonish any previous selector or anything. Just this is what libraries across the board have. They all have these kind of major weeding problems. So,
Stella, I have a quick question for you, and the other members might as well. I just wonder, of all the donations we get, do we ever cull those and find things that we want to keep for the collection, or do they all go for resale?
so the last few years, we are very lucky in that our materials budget is a very healthy budget. It is an appropriate budget for the size of the facilities, of the two facilities that we have. So we don't really have a need to go through the donations. Every now and then, Kathy Mahaffey, who does go through the donations, she sometimes finds something about local history, and she will definitely bring it to my attention. So that's a huge help there. But overall, we don't really have a need to go looking through the donations because we fortunately are blessed with an appropriate budget.
Okay,
Have to
thanks.
go through every single book that's donated.
I had a question for you as well, Stella.
Not one book goes in the sorting room to resell or send to booksellers or whatever until she looks at it.
You mentioned at the end that one thing that's important to bear in mind is what the vision for the collection is. And so I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what the vision for the collection is. And, obviously we have these statistics in front of us, but, can you talk a little bit about what you see in the next couple of years, how that vision sort of impacts where we are now, where we'd like to be, are we on track, are we not?
So certainly, books are still flying off our shelves. Print material is not going to be leaving this library anytime soon. We do see an increase in overdrive users, so we do know that we continually need to bear in mind that we do have a segment of the population, and I know some of you are sitting here that like to use ebooks and e-audiobooks. I do envision probably within the next couple of years that the CD audiobooks will probably be a dying collection, and already there are some libraries that are no longer acquiring new CD audiobooks. We are seeing more and more that vehicles don't have CD players in them, so that's something that we can definitely anticipate in a couple of years. That will probably be a non-existent collection here. With music CDs, they still seem to be fairly popular here. We're not really getting requests for streaming music. There are various vendors out there that do work with libraries and provide streaming services, but we're not really getting requests for that at this point in time, I think. And there's some issues with some of those vendors that I've talked to other librarians about. So, because initially a couple of years ago, I was thinking, oh, we've got to get streaming music and we've got to get streaming video, but I'm not hearing that from the public. One of the visions I see is I would really like to get our library things off the ground. So for example, we do already have a telescope that we want to start circulating. We have the hotspots, but there's all kinds of other things that we could be doing. We really want to provide more kind of STEAM and STEM kits to kids. And one of the things we've also thought of is creating like backpacks that would be great with like maybe have a magnifying glass and binoculars and some trail guides so that families could have something that they could pick up at the library and be ready to go and learn and have fun. So in terms of the overall collection, I do want to hopefully start making our library things happen. But like I say, in terms of books, I think we're good at where we're at right now. Don't see a trend downward at the moment. Our magazines still get used heavily as well, and they do get checked out. So there again, we do have Flipster, which provides electronic access to magazines, but again, we're still seeing usage in the print. So, but overall, one of the things I'm really trying to do is really let the public know we really want purchase suggestions, we really want their input. It is your collection out here, and that's really a trend that I would like to really increase.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
To follow up on that point, I'm just wondering, how do people know? Because actually, I just gave someone advice about how to do that, and I'm just wondering, how do you get the word out that purchase suggestions are,
So
desired?
I do try and encourage public services staff when they're working with somebody, when they're about to do an interlibrary loan, to say, oh, we can acquire this material on your behalf instead of doing an interlibrary loan. So I try to have staff, and I could probably beef that up to give them more talking points. So that's one way. Certainly we could try and do some sort of other marketing push in the future to really kind of let people know how they go about requesting a purchase suggestion, and knowing that if they do, then they get put on hold for the material once it arrives. So
Yeah, the person I was trying to help through that process, what I found out as I was trying to help her was that in order to get to the screen upon which you can do a purchase request, you have to have a login. And she didn't have she didn't have an account, for the catalog, so she never would have run across that screen. So I just suggested her, to create one, or just go to the desk and make the suggestion in person. But even something as simple as just signage, would give some people the idea that that's a service that we provide that they might not otherwise run into. My other question was, how do you handle selection of foreign language materials? How does that?
So that's actually going back to Katie's question. We do want to look at more of the foreign language. I know that there is the school that has the French immersion program, and I would like to bring more French materials in here for grades 1st through 8th. At this point in time, primarily we just have Spanish and then a very small selection of materials in French. But I would like to kind of look at what our community is, and I don't know, maybe out of the strategic plan, we might hear some more underrepresented voices. Even within our Spanish materials, I see people browsing them, but I'd still like to beef up and let people know that these are available to them to check out, because I do think that there's not enough understanding that you can take these home. You can use them at home. So that is an area that we do need to look into more, is making sure that we're collecting for all the different languages in our community. But
And do you feel feel like you have good review sources for those materials, or how do you go about choosing what you already have?
So, excuse me, that's a little tougher.
Yeah.
I think Reforma, which is a library community organization, is good help. For example, Amanda's gone the last 2 years, as has Diana, when they have a little book fairs, and so that's a good place to kind of just get materials on the spot. I know that there is a bookstore over on the west side that does specialize in Spanish language materials, and I just want to get over there and talk to them and see. But definitely trying to find review sources for, let's just say, Spanish is a bit tougher, yeah.
All right, thanks, Stella. Next, we have Jonathan Revelo to talk about facilities.
Can somebody hit the lights for us?
Yeah, Jonathan, I wonder if could someone turn the lights up a little bit? I'm having trouble reading this. Thank you.
So as we've been doing so far this year, we've been going through each department and just highlighting the key points of what each department does. And so we are highlighting today, this month, we're doing the facilities department. So, ta-da, here I am. So next what we do, and so facilities department. So as you can see, that is rendering from Boyd Georgie from 1966 of the library. I think was one of your favorite pictures. So we'll do here. So facilities team. So the facilities team basically, these are the first contact that the community, the patrons, and the staff sees every morning. And we couldn't do anything without them. They're just wonderful guys. Some of them, his first person's name is Gerardo Avila. He's our janitor, gardener, building maintenance. He's been with Altoona Library just for over 20 years. And he's a fantastic guy. I consider him my right hand. I mean, if there's anything that needs to go, that needs to be repaired or something that I cannot see, he points it out to me quickly. So I really thank him for that, and we really try to get it done as fast as possible. My whole thing is preventive maintenance. I've always been into that. PMs are really important to me, and because it will help with deferred renewal. And that's something that I really don't want to have any longer. The next person we have in our facilities team is Ricardo Loza. He's our gardener, building maintenance also. He takes care of our irrigation systems, our property. He takes care of all of our gardening needs on both here and the Bob Lucas Branch Library over on Lincoln and Ventura. Wonderful guys. Ricardo, he's surprised me by helping doing irrigation systems and doing them themselves and upgrading these things. One of the things I will point out later on is we installed a new irrigation system on the south side of our parking lot, and it is a teaching also irrigation system, and I'll tell you why. So this is the daily functions that be done daily by the facility staff. Of course, we see sweeping floors, vacuuming, dusting furniture and other things, move heavy equipment and furniture, painting, help set up for library programs, which is essential. Emergency cleanup for maintenance. We do have a lot of emergency cleanup. Sometimes since we have an older building, we have the plumbing system doesn't seem to be working well, or the air conditioning system that seems to be working functionally now finally because of PMs. And other gardening upkeep, grass keeping, equipment is very important, so we've upgraded our equipment. And these are my daily functions. So overseeing building maintenance, managing facility budget. I just wanted to put down everything else. So just to be along come site, also working closely with Cindy, with the director. So we're working closely with you. So we'll be working closely trying to help facilitate this building, to try to upgrade it to where it can be, where it should be. On-call emergencies, if they're not there, I'm the guy in the bathroom cleaning up the mess. So that's what you need to do. My whole attitude is servant leadership. If I'm asking them to do this, I better be doing it myself. So that's what it should come down to. Future facility projects for the ALD. One of the things that we'll be working on is working with our architectural team, ARG, Architectural Resources Group, for the district, our ADA issues and the upgrades that we need, addressing the ALD's MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing issues that we need to do. Here, the upgrades that need to be due. Complete the FER renewal and recurring needs projects addressed in our 2018 facility assessment report. We have been upgrading it. We have been doing some of these things. We've been changing out the handles on all the doors to ADA accessible. They are no longer knobs, even though they were gorgeous knobs, they're beautiful, they were not ADA compliant. So we changed them all to levers as best as possible. So we have to change them all ourselves. We upgraded some of the doors to keypads so they'll be safe for the staff, electronics. We've put new exit signs. We've upgraded some of our electrical. We did an emergency job at our branch, the Bob Lucas branch, because there was an outlet that hadn't been touched for over, we don't know how long, but it was ungrounded and it was a loose wire. And my electrician went down there and he goes, I'm surprised your building didn't burn down, because it was just sitting there, but it wasn't in use, which helped us. So when he came over there and he upgraded the material, so we took care of that. And so that's what we're here to do. Preventive maintenance is, like I said, is key. Facilities department DIY programs. Everyone has a program, why not me? So we want to do, so that's why out there in the south part of the parking lot, we have put in 3 irrigation systems. We put on rotators, we put down spray mounts, we also put down a drip system, and we put down a quick connect. So that way, anyone that wants to know how to learn to do these, we can show them how to do it quickly.
That's cool.
And to be able to, where certain plants or in certain areas, what type of system this needs, what type of system this needs. And so we have the 3 different type of systems that are available. One comes from just a timer, one comes from just a drip system, and the other one is a quick connect, where you don't have any more need of opening a water valve. Because the thing about it is, because we would have people coming from the, we would have some people coming tonight using our water system, filling up their RVs and doing things like that. So we took care of that, and we used a quick connect system where it has a knob that goes into the water spout, and that way we can water by hand. And so there's some areas that we cannot get to a unit yet, an irrigation system yet, unless I go underneath the concrete, and I'm not going to do that yet. I'll wait till AEG tells me to. So, ARG tells me to. So that's what I want to do. And also, there's people in the community that want to learn how to build things or learn how to do certain projects. Tony Ward from Christmas Tree Lane, who will be speaking later to you guys, he told me that there's a new mandate about wells for runoff system. Is that correct? So they want to do a well system here in Altadena, certain yards for their runoff. Well, why can't we be the people that show them to do that? Why can't we have a program that shows that? Also, I have here also we're doing environmentally sustainable tools. Our tools right now, I love a brand called Milwaukee. And Milwaukee has great tools, systems, where one battery fits everywhere. I know, Nicole doesn't like it, but anyway, so, but they're great tools. And so there's a program happening October 5th that's called Clean Air Day. And I wish I could be there, but I'm on vacation that time. So, but they're talking about different systems where our backpacks that are battery operated blowers. We have a battery operated blower, and it's fantastic. But doesn't do as good a job as a gas operated one, but the technology is getting better and better. And so I'm doing tools that are needing less gas and are safe for the environment. composting center. One of the things that we want to do here is through Levi Brewster. He was telling me about doing a composting center. They have, we're thinking about that. I'm just contemplating that where the community can come and bring up compost, clean compost, well, no meat, but certain, composting so we could have it here, so we could put it back into the ground here in the library, so we could use that. And to quote Tom Petty, the future is wide open. We don't know what else we want to do. We'll do this. And I'm going to share a video with you. So this video was done, we had a professional development day. And we were talking about each department and how a hidden gem of the facilities department, or in different departments, their hidden gem. So to me, this is a hidden gem. This deals with our air conditioning system. Now, the air conditioning system's over 20 years old. It's going almost out of its life cycle. And the system has its thermostat inside the unit. And we'll show you how we have to take care of that situation right now. So. For almost 20 years or over.
Videos like that?
So that's what has been done for over this time. But they do it because that was the technology at that time, I guess. One of the things that we're trying to upgrade is, I did get a bid for bringing the thermostats down to our level that'll be worked on this.
Jonathan, you're so demanding. Didn't you have it in the building?
But because of the preventive maintenance that we've done, and we've been upkeeping this, and the weather's been pretty agreeable this summer, it hasn't been that bad, but we have had a great air conditioning system. We're to the point where they're
Are
telling
you
us it's
just
too
talking
cold.
about, what about Bob Lucas's air conditioning?
We've upgraded it.
It was so hot that day we had,
Because there was so many people in that room.
It was like the fire marshal.
There was too many people in that room.
Yeah.
And so it's sustainable for that building. And so here we eventually will need another one because our backstacks does not have one. But that's one of the things that ARG will be looking into with us to do that. But, we are trying to do as best as we can with what we have and work within the footprint that we have. But we do this willingly because we want to help our patrons, we want to help the staff, and we're here to serve. So that's it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, John. I'm glad you can do that with humor too. That really is nice. Right, we've been going since 5 o'clock, so I would propose that perhaps we have the financial report and then maybe take a break for 10 or 15 minutes. So I'll let Nicole go next.
Thank you. So page 21 is the financial report. This is for the month of July. And as you'll notice on this report, year-to-date expenditures are exceeding year-to-date revenue. And if that expenditure number looks a little high, it is, and I'll explain why in just a moment. So revenue highlights, Passports is doing well. There was a little bit left of property tax revenue from the prior year in July. And then I do have a note that we're aiming to do the audit in November. Unfortunately, the auditors weren't available for my preferred dates of the end of this month or early next month, so it's gonna have to wait until maybe mid to late expenditure highlight, so the reason that expenditure number is so high is because we prepaid many of our insurance and liability premiums in July. So we paid earthquake, property liability, workers' comp, and our CalPERS unfunded accrued liability. That's usually a monthly payment of about $12,000, but by prepaying it at the beginning of the year, we saved 3.5%, which was just over $5,000. So you'll notice in the budget versus actual documents, some of those line items are already at 100%, and those are all the insurance and liability premiums that we prepaid. Any questions?
Just a comment, and that is when you look at this same monthly report for July back a year ago, you see the same deficits at work and so on. So we're in a zone right now, just to paraphrase, in which we're drawing down on our reserves because we haven't replenished our income coffers yet from the tax money, right?
Yes, so that is the trend every year. We won't see a reflected excess income until we do get that first payment in December.
Right, and then just using last year's report as a sounding board, we're pretty much right in the same zone as we were then, so.
Yes, we're on track. A few of the numbers did increase compared to last year. The unfunded accrued liability goes up every year. There's nothing we can do about that.
Okay.
And our insurance premiums did go up a little bit this year.
All right, any questions?
That looks good.
All right, thanks, Nicole. So I propose that we adjourn for about 15 minutes and reconvene a little before 7 o'clock. I'm sorry, I said adjourn, totally
No, I
wrong.
made that mistake once,
Or
Jerry.
recess. So let's gather again at about 7 o'clock. Thank you. So we are back from our recess at 6:58. And we'll go ahead and continue here. We left off with Nicole's financial report, and now we'll continue on with the committee reports. The Budget Committee, as you heard, courtesy of Nicole, has not convened because we're still waiting for activity around the audit and so on, so there's nothing to report there. The next is facilities. Jason?
Yeah, I didn't do a written report. We really just have a couple of quick updates. The first being our contract with ARG is just under final review with BB&K, so hopefully we'll be able to sign off on that very soon. It's going to be a 16-week plan from beginning to end. So we'll be looking at kicking off the new year with some amazing new plans to look forward to. The ad hoc committee, Terry and myself and others and Jonathan also met with Margaret Sullivan on Saturday morning. Kind of just downloaded her on what we've been up to with the facilities and what our goals are with ARG so that can be incorporated into the strategic plan. And then going forward, once we are on board with ARG, Margaret's going to do a conference call, probably a Skype meeting with the folks at ARG to really make sure that they're on the same page and we're incorporating both plans. So that's where we're at. Things are moving along.
All right, thank you, Jason. Are there any questions? No? The Executive Search Committee, I'll let Betsy report on that.
Done and done.
We've got nothing going on. We're going out for coffee, talking about baseball. Part of our original, Katie reminded me that part of our original motion that created us now disbands us. So we officially are disappearing as a committee, and we're happy about that. So.
And just before you're officially dispersed into the air, just thank you so much for all the work that you guys did, because that was a super demanding process, and obviously we came up with a fantastic result and it really worked out, but I know that it was really time consuming, and so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our pleasure, truly.
All right, Strategic Planning Committee, and all I have to say is your reports keep getting better and better, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I didn't even do this one. Margaret Sullivan did this one, so I'm not even going to take credit for it, but it looks great. So what you have in your packet is it's what they call a point-in-time deliverable. It's like basically our phase 1 report. So phase one was the first trip that she and her team took. We've just finished, as of Sunday afternoon, trip number 2. So you'll have another one of these next month, kind of talking about what's happened in the interim. So I want to talk about where we are in the process, and some of the techniques and approaches that we're using. A lot is happening right now, and so I just want to give you as much context as I can. So phase one was really about getting initial information, and so that's what you see in the report in front of you. We had, as you know, our community town hall, which all of you guys were at. We had a meeting with the strategic planning committee, we had staff meetings, we had lots and lots of different opportunities to engage with folks. All of us did one-on-one interviews, so a lot of data kind of got dumped into the pool initially, and what happened over the next 6 or 8 weeks was we slowly started to see some strategic themes emerge, and that's really where we are now. So over the last trip, a lot of the work that happened was focused on developing those strategic themes and figuring out what they actually mean, right? And that's a kind of jargony way of saying, what are we actually talking about? Because everybody says, oh, we want better community engagement, which is great, but what does that actually look like? What are the contours of that? What does that mean? And so what starts to emerge is, hey, we really care about focusing on partnerships in a more serious way, and looking at where the library can be a primary provider of something, and where it can be a partner and a facilitator, and where it can just be an amplifier. And identifying some of those organizations, creating community asset maps, like really getting everything on the table and figuring out what we're working with. So that's the phase that's just completed. Some of the work that's been happening with the staff is really interesting. So Betsy, you asked me about this a little bit. There's a technique called directed storytelling, and the idea is that, you know, rather than looking at statistics or other quantitative measures, we want to add a qualitative aspect to this as well, and one of the best ways to do that is to talk to people who are coming in and out of the library. So the staff went through a process of training and then gathered information where they went in depth with individual patrons or groups of people who were doing the same thing, like computer users and observing behavior. And so what they would do is ask about not just what a patron was there to do, but what else was going on in their life. What were some of their life goals and aspirations, and what had happened previously in their day, what was going to happen later in their day, because our goal is, whenever everybody comes into the library, they have an outstanding and phenomenal experience, but we also want to make sure that, if there are needs that we can meet for people, that they're aware that that's a thing we can do, and we're aware that people are coming in from lots of different places and experiences and backgrounds. So collected all of that, and the staff did a tremendous job in putting all of it together. 2 days of workshops with the entire staff when the library was closed. And every report I've heard was that those were really positive, and really, really worthwhile. So we also had a meeting with Margaret and her team and the town council, and myself and Terry, you were there, thank you so much for that. We talked about how we can partner better with council, and how there are similar goals that all of us have in building a better and stronger community in ways in which we can kind of travel alongside each other. We had a meeting with the Friends and the Foundation to talk a little bit about some of what their goals, concerns, aspirations, hopes are, and how the library can both, partner better with our support groups, and also make sure that, for some of our, I think, most enthusiastic supporters of the library, that we're really hearing where they're coming from and making sure that there's strong buy-in and good investment in what we're doing going forward, because if we don't have the Friends and Foundation on board, man, we're up the creek without a paddle. So I think that was a really productive meeting. And then on Sunday we had our community committee, and we met with Margaret. And really what we did there is we looked at some of the results of all of this and talked about sort of larger strategic themes and vision and mission. And one thing that really came out of that meeting that I'm very excited about is a theme that had emerged all the way along in all these conversations about how we're really embracing a transition from a passive model of a library to a very active model of a library. So in the past, right, the model is like the library is here and people come to it, and then we give them information when they ask for it, right? So books and resources and whatever it is.
But the idea of being an active library is that we don't wait for people to come to us, we go to them. So that can mean everything from actively engaging with folks to find out what they want to creating library experiences that happen outside the four walls of this library. So pop-up events and partnership events and ways of creating the library in lots of different places where people might not necessarily expect it. So that active model is something that I think is really going to drive our strategic planning model, thinking about how we can take the lead in certain areas, how we can partner in other areas, how we can support other efforts. And so I think, you know, where we are now is we are collating all of this data. We're running presently, and if you haven't seen it online yet, I really encourage you to go to altadena.library.org/strategic planning. All of these materials are up there, so the point in time report that you have in the board packet is up there. All of our other strategic planning stuff is up there as well. And there is a community survey that we're running for about the next month to get community input for anybody who maybe hasn't been to a town hall or, you know, hasn't had their voice heard or has some other thoughts they want to contribute. So we want to get that out as widely as possible. It's available in English and in Spanish. We have it online. We'll have, I'm sure, print copies as well, as many different places as we can think of. And we'll try to get all of that data collected. And so now we're putting all of this into a draft document. That's what's going to happen over the next couple weeks. Margaret and her team come back in early November, so the first weekend in November. And by that point, we will have a draft version of the plan for all of us to react to. So by the time you get your October board packet, we should have a draft strategic plan included in that for you to take a look at. Obviously, there will be changes and things that, you know, get adjusted before the final version in November, but we're looking forward to having, you know, a really robust conversation here among the board with all of your thoughts. And then the same thing with our community committee on Sunday, November 3rd, 4th, whatever that first Sunday is. The 3rd, I think. And thank you. Sunday, November 3rd with the community committee. And then on Monday, November 4th, we'll have another town hall for exactly the same reason, to let people react to the draft plan, say, you know, kind of what they see, if there are any gaps or things that they'd like to see adjusted or feedback that they have. So things are moving, there's a lot happening, but I will say every single time I have another conversation about strategic planning, I get increasingly more hopeful and optimistic. And the feedback that we've gotten from all of our community partners, whether it's town council or other organizations, really supports this belief that I certainly have, that the way forward for our library is collaboration, and that we are so much stronger when we work with everybody else. And everybody's excited to come to the table with us, so that's a really good feeling.
On the meeting on the 4th, the town hall, is that going to be here in this room?
I think so. We had talked yesterday about maybe the potential of having it over at Bob Lucas, but right now, as of right now, it's scheduled here. But I also know that there's a Friends meeting the first Monday.
I also talked about having it at Bob Lucas.
Okay.
So, in process.
TBD.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Thank you so much, Katie, for that report. The next is trustee reports, and we just maybe start on my right here with you, Jason. Have anything?
Nothing additional right now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the only thing I would say is we're in the process of getting up some content online and on social media about the oral history event we did last month. So that will be available for download, and it looks like we're gonna plan another event in February in conjunction with Black History Month. And more on that as it goes, but one of the really exciting conversations that's starting to come out from the collaboration with Town Council and Historical and us here at the library is thinking about not just making all of this oral history, you know, available online, but some sort of physical representation. We've been batting around the idea of putting together something like a civil rights trail in Altadena and having markers, you know, throughout town. Everything from Owen Brown all the way to Eugene's house where Lieutenant Goodall lived, and thinking about visibly marking some of the really interesting people who have made our community what it is. So very early stages, obviously a collaborative process, but I think one that's really cool.
I was gonna ask, had you already talked to Eugene then about that whole
Yeah, I
project?
talked to Eugene about it, and we're gonna figure out whether it makes sense to do like oral history stuff at his event and someplace else, or in conjunction with it, or what that looks like, because he's got family members who know about Lieutenant Goodall, who is an amazing person, by the way, like just absolutely amazing. And if you go on YouTube, there's a video from 2010 of him giving a talk at PCC, I think about a year before he died. And he talks about his life. It's quite long, but he talks about his life and his experience and, you know, sort of the role that he played in the huge civil rights, basically, walkout. There was an officers club that didn't allow Black service members who were officers to use it. And so he and some other Black service members basically staged a civil rights protest, and it's widely regarded as the thing that forced the armed services to actually deal with civil rights and really integrate in a meaningful way. And so he's, you know, a tremendously interesting person, and somebody that I think, you know, is just one example of many interesting Altadena residents who maybe don't get the recognition that they deserve, so we want to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Thanks, Katie. And then for me, I will report on the town hall that took place with Catherine Barger and Senator Portantino a week or so ago at the Magnet School down there at the corner of, I forget the name of it.
Almolino and Calaveras.
Yeah, Almolino Calaveras. A very nice auditorium. It's the first time I've been in there. It's a very, very nice school. And there was a lot of folks there. Mark was there among others, and it was interesting to hear those two speak. Senator Portantino had finished his session at Sacramento at the State House there at 3 in the morning that morning, and taken the red-eye plane out there and gotten there on time for the meeting, and looked fairly brisk for all of that. Catherine Barger was there, of course, as well, and they fielded questions from the audience, written questions. And I put in a question about the library. Unfortunately, it didn't get read, but they addressed a lot of things. And just in terms of community and what's happening, the biggest item for them is homelessness right now. That was the most discussed item that was on the floor. Lots of questions about that and so on. They had just passed a bill or introduced a bill for the governor's signature. I think Senator Portantino had been involved in this for the late school start time. And that's a situation in which kids will be going to school at 8:30 or maybe even late, 8 or 8:30, because there are studies that show that they do better in school if they are allowed to sleep a little bit more. So I thought that was interesting. They talked about mental health issues, especially vis-a-vis the number of beds that are available for acutely ill folks and mental health issues, especially those that are living on the street, and access to those beds. There's a gulf there, there's a gap there that they're trying to work through, so that they get more beds freed up for more treatment on folks that really need it. There was a amendment which got a lot of applause in the room, you know, up in the front, about plastic straws and single-use plastics and so on. That ban on that type of plastic did not pass, apparently, at the state level. But Senator Portantino and Catherine Barger were both urging the activists in the room, which were all, you know, they don't want plastics in the environment anymore, to really stay with it. And they expect that in the future that's an item, an environmental item that will finally get through the Assembly and the Senate. So it was a terrific meeting, and next time they come, I don't know when that'll be. This was, again, sponsored by the Altadena Town Council. I urge everybody to go. It's worth your time to see what's happening in the county.
Terry, can I ask, do you know who schedules those?
Well, this, like I said, was done by the Altadena Town Council, and I'm not sure who they approached. Susie, who you and I both have talked to, was there, and she was there to sort of catch any other comments that didn't make it to the dais there where they were speaking. So I imagine she'd be a contact point for any
Yeah,
communication.
I would just suggest an alternative time to Saturday morning.
Oh, I see, yeah, no, they didn't
The
discuss
Jewish
that.
community, that's hard.
Yeah. Right, you have anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. So moving on, unfinished business, we've got the Brown Act refresher, and that will be Kylan.
Yes. So, it's not another quiz. This is going to be the Brown Act in recent news. So I thought that so there's not very many slides, but they are text heavy, so I was just gonna kind of give you an update, and then if you guys wanna actually like read through the slide, you can do that, let me know. But I will give you like an overview of the case and the news. And I think this is interesting and it's important because I think, you know, we don't really think about the Brown Act and, you know, it's not like the biggest news that's out there, but it is important and there are things happening that, you know, we should pay attention to because they can be helpful and, you know, some of these are kind of funny, but let's get started. Okay, so there's on the left-hand side is the headline. And this is a really recent case where as part of the potential development of a Los Angeles Clippers arena, there, you know, have been public meetings and contract negotiations, and they actually, Inglewood was cited earlier this year as violating the Brown Act for withholding information, and so this is in addition to that. They're being investigated again. Basically, they had a resolution and they left key information out of that because they wanted to avoid unwarranted attention.
Well, they got it.
So,
Didn't work out.
yeah, that backfired. So they, IRATE, which is the advocacy group that asked the district attorney to look into this, believes Inglewood was intentionally deceptive to avoid public scrutiny. So they already have been cited for doing this, and they're, you know, it's happening again. As we all know, we can't leave information off of agendas or in resolutions. It has to be transparent and as descriptive as possible to give the public the most amount of information. So, does a possible Brown Act violation justify pulling a false fire alarm? So this case, there was a sergeant in San Francisco who she wanted to be let into a meeting. There was a task force on homelessness, and she asked to be let into the meeting, and they denied her. And they told her to go away, basically. So she didn't know what else to do, and she pulled the fire alarm because she believed that they were violating the Brown Act, and the meeting had to stop. And so she ended up being charged with a misdemeanor because she pulled a false fire alarm. So definitely a Brown Act violation does not justify pulling a false fire alarm. And these are all very recent. So this one in Santa Barbara, a former professor came to a public meeting, and she, at her public comment time, started to cite the Pledge of Allegiance. She was upset that the board had recently adopted a practice of not doing the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. So she came to the meeting, started reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and a current professor in the audience was shouting over her and encouraging the other audience members to like shut her down and just being overall, you know, overly disruptive. And so she is now suing the Santa Barbara City College Board of Trustees because she is saying that, you know, her First Amendment rights and her public comment and all that, the Brown Act was violated because they did not remove the current professor that was disrupting her, and that they have an obligation to remove that individual from the meeting if they're, you know, basically disrupting the meeting so that it couldn't take place because she couldn't continue her comment. So I thought this was kind of interesting because it's kind of on the flip side, you know.
Yeah.
And apparently the president of the board did ask, you know, did try to restore order, but, you know, kind of gave in to the louder individual, which was the person disrupting the meeting. And so now they're being sued.
Classic Brown Act mistake.
And so this is the really recent one that I actually
was on the radio
heard
this
about.
morning.
Yeah, this morning. Oh, that's interesting. I'll put that in my PowerPoint. So yeah, yeah, a judge ruled, on the 18th, last Wednesday, that, Don Rowe's appointment was, void because the board violated the Brown Act in appointing her. And so, it's interesting because they are saying they didn't know what they were doing, which is totally valid and, but at the same time, it's really interesting because the county board of supervisors has county attorneys that were, guiding them through this, and they still violated the Brown Act, and the judge's decision was saying that they didn't cure it. So basically, they did a secret ballot through emails and narrowed down their candidates, and they ended up rescinding their, the list that they had narrowed the candidates down, and they thought that had corrected it, because they then went on in a public meeting to choose Don Rowe, but the judge said that did not cure the Brown Act violation of the secret ballot. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. They are appealing that decision, and just be something to keep an eye on. And then this next slide is just kind of the timeline, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, yeah. That was interesting.
So why did the December 18th thing not cure it? Because it was like substantively not different? Is that what?
Yeah,
is that what it
they
is?
rescinded their lists, but they still didn't publicly interview all the candidates.
Right,
And they should have, I guess, maybe, I'm not the judge, but they should have, I guess, started that process over and,
Right.
made everything public and open.
Okay.
So do we think they had the option with 48 qualified applicants to, in a public meeting, like, discuss and winnow them down?
Yeah, I don't know how, and this is their defense, is that they didn't know how best to do this. And as you can see, on December 13th, they suspended the appointment process and got advice from their attorneys, which then they rescinded their lists, and still, the Superior Court judge is saying that wasn't good enough. So I don't know, it will be interesting to see if any,
Watch this one.
regulations come out of this as to how supervisors, should be appointed, or how that process works, but.
Yeah, I'm curious about the application. What kind of an application qualifies 48 out of 52 applicants for something like a board of supervisors?
Yeah, I
Maybe they
wasn't
need
sure,
a more
maybe that was
rigorous
like
application.
residency or something, I wasn't sure why, that happened, but, yeah, it will be interesting to see how that one plays out.
Bring us updates on that.
Yeah, sure.
Next month.
Thank you. Yeah, my ears perked up when I heard that on the radio.
All right, thank you, Kylan. You've done a good job with all these topics and everything, so thanks a lot for doing that. Okay, the next thing is, we are going to take a look at the updated records retention policy for an action. Did I get that right, Cindy?
Yeah, this one, we actually do have a resolution. So if you recall, last month I brought a records retention schedule, 33-page document for your review. And you requested that we put an amendment in the resolution that would allow for a 5-year board oversight of the schedule. As it was written, it was up to the discretion of the director. And it still is within that 5-year period, but this would allow for review 7 is the change to ensure sufficient oversight by the board, the district director shall bring forth blah, 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 every 5 years for board review. So the motion in front of you is, and this has been reviewed again by BB&K, Isaac Rosen at BB&K. So this is asking to review and approve the amended records retention schedule and related resolution as revised.
All right, why don't we take a motion and have a discussion if it's needed.
Yeah, so move to approve the amended resolution.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve this resolution and policy. Discussion.
This looks good. I mean, the only substantive change is the 5-year review process, and everything else we discussed pretty thoroughly last month, so looks good to me.
I was astonished at how many different categories there are of this and the variation that occurs as well. So it is good, I think, to have a good, grasp of this going forward. I can see where some unintentional mistakes could be made in document retention very easily too, so this is good.
And with your approval, Nicole and Kylan and Michaela will be probably going through records for what we can delete, shred, or store in some
Okay.
cases, because we are short on storage space.
Right.
It was very little I noticed that was permanent, that you have to keep permanently. A lot of it goes. All right, so it's been moved and seconded to approve this resolution. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, the next one does not include a resolution, so it is the electronic communications retention policy. And we brought a draft of this to you at the last meeting for your review. And since then, we have met, Katie and I had a discussion because it is related to board activity as well as staff activity. Katie and I had a discussion with Isaac Rosen, once again from BB&K. And I think what we've done between the last meeting and this meeting is make this policy much clearer, much more user-friendly. I think the most relevant sections in the policy are probably section 3.1, where it says all emails sent or received by the district are automatically archived and saved for 2 years and 1 month. After 2 years and 1 month, the email is automatically deleted from the archive unless retained as detailed below. District personnel may also retain emails based on email's business value. So this seems to be the most relevant part of the policy. We did sit down with Christopher as well to see what was feasible and what was not feasible within our system, and he says that everything that's listed in here we can do, which is automatically delete emails after a certain amount of time, but with the understanding that if you have your archive files, you can keep files that are needed, necessary for business purposes. But as I said, this does relate to the board as well as the staff. The thought right now is for you to approve the policy, and then next month you would bring it back with how to integrate it into the board policies.
Okay, can I get a motion then to approve this policy?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Did I get I'm sorry, did I get a
I
motion?
moved,
said,
I
okay.
moved and Katie seconded.
All right, and any discussion on
Yeah,
this?
just a little bit. So if you guys remember, in our board policy process, we had separate electronic communications things. So basically, this would be, this new electronic record retention policy, because it applies to both staff and us, would be sort of the superseding document. So we just need to make sure that the board policies now are consistent with this, and that we have really clear best practices for how to handle email, because what we basically said, if you recall in the board policies, is like email is kind of the destination location for any kind of other electronic communication. So if you're getting text messages or anything, like you basically create an email version and email it to yourself so that we have everything for any potential public records requests that would come up. So what we'll do next month is have a resolution with the amended board policies that explain exactly what we need to do to be compliant with this. But it's really good, it's pretty user-friendly. I think it is in no way onerous, but we just wanna make sure everybody knows, you know,
What is it?
what we're supposed to do. Yeah, exactly.
So we'll have a vote to amend our policies, basically.
Yeah, so what we'll do next month is we'll have a resolution, that's what is, we adopted in the agenda today and change. We're gonna have an actual resolution with the new text included for our board policies that say, you know, what it replaces whatever is in there now in section 15 or 16 or whatever it is. So that will come back to us next month, but if we approve this now, then we can do the resolution for board policies.
Okay, great. So we've got a motion on the floor to approve the policy for electronic communication and retention. And at a later date, we will deal with the resolution, any amendments that we have to do. So can I get a vote then for this motion? All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All right, that motion carries as well. Now we are on to new business. And before we get into the first two items here, Mark, would you like to speak before we start this? Okay.
Mark Mariscal, I am not speaking, I'm speaking as an individual, not any of the organizations that I'm affiliated with. So your employment contract today, had I been here last month, I would have told you that as a former board of trustee, the idea of having to raise the salary level for the district director for the position is something that had been debated in at least two other directors that I knew of, three other directors. And I don't think they were raised at any of them. But taking that aside, I think what you could have done, and I'm throwing this out because of thinking for next year's budget, that you could have taken an opportunity at this time to deal with the health insurance issues for the employees, including the new director coming in. And so, you know, I kind of remember in 2002 or 3, we started moving, I thought we were moving to try to get employees more monthly health insurance dollars. And then I know I've said here a couple different times since all of you have been elected, that you don't have to pay retiree health insurance benefits. It's good to do, but you don't have to by law, I don't believe, and you could check that. But your employees that are working, especially those that have that choose something that choose something from that tier 3 or that level 3 plan or region 3 plan with CalPERS health insurance. You know, it's tough when you come in with a family, and so quickly I did say to Nikki that I was going to talk quickly about the contract with the idea that you should, it would have been better to give her $18,000 less in salary and give her $18,000 more in benefit with the idea than you would have dealt with, if that was what needed. Then you could have dealt with the rest of the employees over a period of time. Because I don't know if the four of you have heard, I'm sure maybe Cindy's heard a little bit, but you know, the employees here, some of them have families and pay a good amount out of pocket for their health insurance. So I just throw that out. Second thing on her contract, and I quickly just had to ask, there is no provision for an employee coming in with years of service from another public agency. And I mean that with starting from vacation pay. So although you're going to give 100 hours of admin leave, and you're going to prorate it so that there's 16 hours this year and then there's 100 starting on January 1st for the year, I mean, some of you know, so I came, you know, when I went from one job and I became a director of an agency and another, they granted me, they started with, I think I had 120 or 160 vacation hours and then accrued accordingly. And then I was also able to accrue at the level of years of experience. So I just happen to have 30 plus years, so that means when I went to the County of Monterey, I was able to start accruing at that level. And I think you have done your negotiations, but I think you can add a line in or come back next month and offer the director, you know, 80 hours of vacation, a little bit of sick leave, and or then let her accrue it at another level up of whatever the next level is. I don't know if the employees from 0 to 5 years accrue at a certain rate and then 10 years and above or whatever that is. But I got to tell you that I don't mean to negotiate for a new employee, and you know, if Renee Amy was here, he'd be kicking me against the wall for trying to spend more dollars. But I will tell you that if you don't have staff that are able to come to work because they might have a sick child, or sick themselves, or do something like that, and don't have the compensated time to be able to use it, when you're only accruing, a new employee, I think I asked Nicole quickly, accrues 10 hours a month of vacation time, I think, right? And then they do accrue sick hours also. But to start a bank at 80 hours or 120 is not unheard of for the head of an agency coming in. That's all I've got to say, and you can still correct it tonight when you finalize this, if you so choose to, and if you so choose to want to have that, Nikki, because it's really up to you, but I just think it's something that should be done.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Oh, and 9B, sorry. 9B, I support keeping Cindy around for a little longer to help with any transition needed, so I think it's a great idea, so I just wanted to say that.
Thanks. All right. That leads us into (9A), which is the contract that we've negotiated with Nikki Winslow for this position. And although we had a closed session to talk about some of the final details of the process of hiring and get a complete understanding of, to all the board members about how that went, we wanted to break this out, this contract approval, as part of the public program so that folks can see exactly what's going on. We didn't get a chance to put it in the packet before before it was posted, so there were copies floating around here. Folks can get that, and of course it's going to be available to the public after we talk about it as well. I'll start, I guess, on this, or maybe the way to do this to have the format go properly is to go ahead and get a motion and a second for the approval of the contract for Nikki Winslow, and then we'll have a discussion period before we vote.
So,
Seconded.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve Nikki Winslow's employment contract, and now we have a chance to talk a little bit about that. So first of all, do the members have any questions about the contract, any lingering questions? I don't believe that would be the case. I can tell the folks in the audience that we have hired Nikki at a salary of $157,000 a year, which is not the top of the salary range that we voted in last month. When we readjusted that range, it was at the recommendation of the consultant that was helping us with our search. And we went back, as you all know, those of you that were in attendance last month, and looked at the average salaries that were occurring for the district directors or the executive directors of libraries across the area, and came up with that amount. The board authorized our search committee to have it was an amount that we were authorized to offer, and everything about the offer itself was done within the confines of guidelines that we had set. So $157,000, there's 100 hours of sort of flex time or leave time that's available for her to cash out. It's done every fiscal year, so that the prorating is done for this fiscal year over until the end of June, and then we'll have another year that kicks in, is my understanding of this. There's a car allowance of $300 a month. There's a phone, some other perks that are pretty typical for a district director. Any comments or, I wouldn't say complaints, or worries that we have carved out a position and sort of maybe given it a different treatment than we would others? We'll address that a little later tonight, because we also are going forward with consultants and plans that would have us address salary issues for the rest of the staff, as well as we promised we would about 2 meetings ago. So the fact that these are separate processes for the timing that we were working with is not ominous at all, because we're taking the library as a package, the employees here, we're looking at their salaries, and we're moving forward with reasonable and customary rates for all the folks at the library. So that would be my paraphrasing of the contract. And with that, I guess we're ready for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. We've So approved her contract, and Nikki, again, your second welcome to the Altadena Library. The next contract item here is, it's all me. I'm bringing this to the board regarding Cindy. Cindy did not ask for this, but one of the conditions of us hiring Cindy, who's done an exemplary job here, on a wage only, without any benefits, without even any overtime for the first, 3/4 or more of her tenure here. We hired her at the highest rate, and I think it's the right thing to keep her at the highest rate now that we've adjusted it higher, beginning on August the 26th. So I am bringing to the board a contract amendment that would adjust her salary from what it was previously, and I can't do the wage in my head, to $80.05 per hour, which would be the top of the scale if we amortize it correctly, for the 10 or 12 weeks that she has left here, from August 26th until she leaves. I just think it's the right thing to do, so I want to bring that to the board.
Yeah, and that's retroactive.
It's retroactive till the 26th, which is when we took the vote. The fiscal impact of this will be about $325 a week, so it's pretty negligible in the grand scheme of things. So with that, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Okay,
I'll second that.
second that, okay. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Now, the next item is the Rosenberg Rules of Order. Are we skipping that one? I'm sorry.
So what we're doing is we're gonna have a motion potentially to adapt it as our governing set of rules, and then next month we'll come back similarly to the email thing. We'll come back with a formal resolution that updates the board policies reflecting that, because we need to do a little adjustment to that section of the policies. So this would just be a vote to adapt it, and then next month we'll do the resolution.
Okay, can I get a motion then to adopt the rules?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion about it?
You know, the only thing I would say, we've talked about this before, but this is just sort of a simplified set of parliamentary procedures. It's recommended by a lot of public agencies in California. This document that you have in here in the packet is put out by the League of California Cities, just with the understanding that Robert's Rules of Order is great for large 300, 400 person bodies or large parliamentary groups, but you know, the portion of Robert's Rules that we use as a 5-member board is a tiny, tiny, tiny piece, and it's overly complex and unnecessarily complicated for a lot of what we do. So this is, the goal with this is just to have an easy on-ramp for people, especially, you know, trustees maybe in future who might not have a background in procedure or, you know, parliamentary process, to make it just easy to understand, easy to use, simple. So that's the goal.
I have a question, Katie. Would
Yeah.
you say it would be true that we kind of essentially already operate with this, and so what we're doing is calling it what it really is?
That's exactly right. So
So
this
it's not going to be a
is-
big difference in how we
There
operate.
is no functional difference, no. So this is very representative of how we operate. And so it just sort of will bring our formal policy into line with what we're actually doing.
I think everything we've done tonight is exactly, except when I adjourned the meeting.
Yeah, that was a red flag.
Yeah.
No, it has been by the book too, on it.
If you can do it in 7 instead of an entire textbook, all for it.
Right, yeah, seriously.
All right, then there has been a motion, and it's been seconded, so all in favor of adopting the Rosenberg Rules of Order, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Katie, for realizing this and seeing it. It's a nice little injection of efficiency into things which we need.
Make our lives easier.
Yeah. All right, the next thing, I crossed out the selection of human resources consultant, because that's one that we're punting until next
No,
time.
that's
No, we're doing that one.
We're doing that.
The investment policy is the one we're punting.
Oh, okay, I crossed that the wrong way.
It's our numbering system, lettering system is confusing, sorry.
So the next item then is the selection of a consultant for the human sources services.
Yeah, so back in June, the board reviewed and approved an RFP that went out for human resources services, and there were should only have one, that's where Nicole has interpreted 3 over the years. A compensation study of all our positions and job audits of positions to determine the appropriate classifications, especially in the support staff roles. But as we worked through this process, it became clear that we should probably do it for all our classifications. So we received 4 responses, and 2 rose to the top, Kaufman Associates and CPS HR Consulting. Nicole did some research and got some references taken care of, and as a result of their proposal and the references, Kaufman Associates has risen to the top. But what we're suggesting, and what I'm suggesting, instead of having COF do all of the, all 4 components of the RFP, I'm asking that they do the job audit of the 15 classifications and the compensation study for a total of $34,945. And the reason for that is because as we went through this process, and I thought about personnel policies and compliance, I had a discussion with BB&K, and after reading the RFP responses where they all said, well, whatever we do, we're not lawyers, it has to be approved by your attorneys, it made more sense to do the other 2 components, the job audit and the employee handbook description, not the job audit, I'm sorry, the legal compliance of all our policies, throw that to BB&K. So what's in front of you is to approve COF going ahead with the job audit and the compensation study, and BB&K reviewing all our policies for legal compliance. And I think once we get the results from BB&K, we can probably look at all the policies, the handbooks, and consolidate them. But if not, then we'll have to come back to you and say, we're going to need some further review. So the cost for BB&K is an estimate, it was $15,000, which would come out of the legal budget, which is $137,000. To date, over 2 months, we've spent with BB&K about $10,000. So our costs thus far are far below what we've been estimating, or what we estimated in the beginning of this fiscal year. And then the $34,945 would come out of what we budgeted for the study with an HR firm, but only $30,000 is in that budget. So this would meet with your approval to approve another $4,000, almost $5,000 to complete those 2 components of the study. So with that, do you have any questions?
Let me just make sure I'm tracking you on the math here. So the idea is that we've budgeted $30,000 for the HR consultant. We need 35, so we need to approve an additional 5. And then we need 15, which we hadn't originally planned for as part of this process, but obviously we need to do this. And what you're saying is that because we're under budget on our legal spending that we've projected thus far, that shouldn't present any major difficulties in our.
Unless something highly unusual happens,
Nobody
I think
doing
we'll be
anything.
okay.
Okay, so, cool. All right, that seems super reasonable to me.
Can I just clarify, I'm pretty sure, but I just want to make sure that the 2 top firms that you were considering each bid separate amounts for the job audit and the compensation study fee, but what COF did was discount it if you did both the job audit and the compensation.
And that's because they'll have one site
There'll be
visit,
efficiencies,
and
essentially.
from an efficiency perspective.
Okay, so even though the 2 columns add up to 36 something, the 34 number, 35 essentially is with the discount, right?
Correct.
Okay.
What's the timeline on this? So does COF do their part first and then BB&K reviews, or does it happen simultaneously?
I think it can happen simultaneously.
Okay. So do you imagine that this would, like, if presuming that we approve this tonight, that this would be something that would be wrapped up in the next 2 months? 3
Well,
months?
especially with the, I think especially with the employee handbook review, that's gonna take a little longer.
Right.
Because I don't know the outcome of what BB&K will come up with and how much work we'll have to do after that.
Right.
The other one, yeah, I can imagine would be 2 months. I would suggest that we not end it before Nikki comes on board, so she can be part of the process, just like
I was just trying to get a sense of whether this is like a several month thing or like a year long thing.
No, several months.
Great, okay, perfect.
I would say no later than the end of the year, but probably before then.
Okay, that seems outstanding.
And then the compensation analysis, is that just salary or are they looking at everything?
So the compensation analysis would be looking at 12 different agencies, looking at our 12 classifications and comparing what we pay and what our benefits are to what those 12 comparable organizations pay.
So we'll look at benefits.
And then that would be brought to you, that information would be brought to you, and you'd have to decide whether you want to increase or decrease, not decrease, but whether you want to do an average, whether you want to be above average, how you would want to compensate employees. But it's too soon to tell. I don't know what the results will be. I think some positions, just preliminarily, me looking at it, some positions are probably right on target in terms of their salary. But then this will hook also into the job audit, because I think we have a couple of classifications where once they look at what people are doing versus what their job description is, there may need to be some change in job classifications of specific people. There's some people, in this library associate position especially, there's a big divergence of what they're doing. So by doing a job audit, they'll be able to figure out, is it appropriate for this person to be an associate, or should it be at a different level?
You probably don't know this, Cindy, but when was the last time that we actually increased the 500, the money that we put towards the healthcare?
It was during Mindy's tenure, so I want to say 2015, we increased it from 450 to 500.
So, that's a good example of where we may have to do further study. So BB&K will tell us if we're complying legally, but then the decision, if you take medical benefits, I assume, there's no legal issue with what we're doing now, but then we will have to determine what's the best practice for this organization as compared to other organizations, or what we think is equitable. So there'll be a lot of decisions to make as we march through this, because there are a lot of related policies related to personnel.
But this decision gets us out of the starting gate and gets things rolling, right? Okay. Well then, can I get a motion then to have this, sounds like a combination of Koff and Associates and BB&K providing this service for us. And was there in that same motion some more money involved too, Cindy?
Well, to be exact, $4,945 is above what we have budgeted in the account 7155 for consultants. There's money in there, correct? However, it's not allocated to this particular project. Only 30,000 of the money in there is allocated to this.
Okay.
And, we could bring it back at mid-year. Well, we could approve it tonight, then we can move forward.
I'm just trying to figure out, is that just pushing money around in the budget as we do all the time anyway? Really the core thing we should be voting on would be approving these two entities to lead the project.
And that's exactly what I was just about to say. And then if we do need the additional 5,000 at mid-year, we can come back and say, we don't have enough in the budget to cover this.
Okay. I would suggest then a motion in which we approve Koff and Associates and Best and Krieger as the two folks that will provide the service for us.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved
I'll second it.
and seconded now to approve these two as the HR consultants. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. And the next one is Nicole's.
So when we did the human resources RFP, we also did one for banking services. You might remember that for Stella and Cindy had a very unfortunate experience at Chase Bank. And I've had some difficulty working with them over the past few years, so it's time for a change. We conferred with Cindy Byram of Platinum Consulting, and she made some great recommendations of banks that have a history of working with governmental clients. Many of her And we also posted it to the CSDA RFP clearinghouse. So we did receive 3 bids from Banner Bank, East West Bank, and Pacific Western Bank. So there's a matrix there for you, and I'm sorry it got broken up when it printed.
Together.
There you go. Yeah. So the 2 that stood out most to me were Pacific Western and Banner Bank. But really, I mean, they all offered the same basic services, the same things that I personally am looking for when I do districts banking. The remote deposit, the positive pay, and the free domestic wire, so that we're still able to do business with LAIF. We just were able to open that account, the local agency investment fund. There were a couple of things that East West offered, the Visa payroll card and the merchant services, which I'm not currently interested in, so that wasn't really a positive. The Pacific Western Bank offered a courier service, which we don't currently use, but I thought we might as well have it if we ever decide that we want to do that in the future. For $20, a courier from their bank would come to the library and pick up our deposit, so that an employee wouldn't have to go to the bank to do that. It's kind of an added checks and balances feature that we're not currently using, but we might want to use in the future. The only issue with them was they did want to charge me for the check scanner. The other 2 banks, I would be leasing the scanner from them, so we wouldn't have to pay for it, but I wouldn't own it. And that's a current issue that I have with Chase Bank, is I lease the scanner from them for $35 a month, which definitely adds up. It's way more than the $326 that I would pay one time to own the scanner. And if there's an issue with the Chase scanner, I can't do anything to fix it. I have to ship it to them and wait for them to fix it and ship it back, or ship me a new one. So sometimes I go 1 to 2 months without having my check scanner, and then I'm taking a huge volume of checks to the bank. So I think it would be more convenient. I think between Christopher and I, if there was ever any issue with the check scanner, we would be able to fix it right away, and it would be no big deal. I wouldn't have to wait for that extended period to get the check scanner back. And Shelley, the account representative at Pacific Western, did tell me if they have an extra one, she'll just give it to me.
There you go.
Yeah. So my recommendation is Pacific Western, although I was also really, really happy with Banner Bank. The only issue is their closest branch is in Columbia.
All right, that's a thorough analysis. Thank you very much for that. And I think we should just proceed to the motion to use Pacific Western Bank now as for our banking services vendor.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded then to use Pacific Western Bank. Is there any discussion right now?
Just in the For What It's Worth department, I know a couple people at Pacific Western, and I totally concur with your assessment. I think it's a great organization, and I've had nothing but positive experiences with everybody, so I'm happy to hear that that was your
Great.
impression as
That's
well.
good to hear.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Right, and that motion carries. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
Investment policy is the one that's been struck, right?
Right.
Okay.
All right, so the next one is the review and approval of the electronic internet policy, also known as computer and internet policy, that's in your packet. In my ongoing review of policies or lack thereof, this is an important one that we need, and it's related to how people use the computers in our libraries. So it basically outlines how one signs up, what the time limits are, what the prohibitions are in terms of use of the machine, what happens if you don't follow those rules in an egregious way. It also includes laptop lending policy, because we do lend laptops to people while they're in the library. They can't check them out of the library, but they use them when they're in the library. That's a really popular service. This document also has a statement of compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act, which we are, if we want to get money from the state library, we need to comply with, which puts certain filters on the machines. This is something at the very last page is something very important, and that's how you enforce the rules. And this will also apply to the code of conduct. But we've never had a process in place in terms of enforcement. So let's say someone is looking at pornography or child pornography, or worst case scenario, and we have to ask them to leave the library. What is the process for that? so this outlines that we can ask someone to leave for a day, that we can up to a year actually, depending on how egregious it is. People have the right to an appeal process. And this is probably more applicable to the next policy I'm going to talk about, but I just wanted to mention it here as well. BB&K has reviewed this policy and given us appropriate language and made sure that in terms of enforcement, we are following all legal requirements. So with that, I recommend approval.
Can I just have a question?
Sure.
On the usage policy, and I know in the IT presentation this was brought up, but so we don't have a time limit on the computers at the main branch, but we do at Bob Lucas. Is that simply just because there's not that many there?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to manage so that one person doesn't sit at a machine all day long, and it gives other people the opportunity. Here we have so many, I mean, we're really blessed with the number of machines that we have, both Macs and PCs, that I haven't seen a time when someone didn't have an opportunity to be on a machine if they wanted to be. And additionally, we have the laptops. I'm not sure, do we check out laptops at Bob Lucas? I'm not sure. We do, yes.
All right, can I get a motion then to approve this policy?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve this electronic internet policy. And just real quickly, is there any further discussion? I have one question.
I do too, but go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Betsy.
I'm just curious how often it happens that you have to tell somebody not to be doing what they're doing on a computer.
In my former life?
Well,
But no, here,
yeah, here.
I don't know of anybody in the room know of any circumstance that has ever happened.
I really haven't seen it. I think once we had somebody where it was a little bit suspicious as to what the individual was doing, and then the individual cut off, and we were kind of trying to see what was going on. There was another instance, I guess I should use the microphone. There was another instance where we did see somebody who was trying to make their own automobile insurance card. Caught him once, told him he couldn't do that, then a couple weeks later came in, was trying to do it again, and I really talked to him again, brought him into my office, and explained that that was illegal behavior. So for the most part, pretty much we don't really have many situations.
Do you ever have patrons complaining about what other people are doing and then having to deal with the patron about whether or not that's an appropriate use? In the same way that you might have challenge materials that people object to, cuss words or whatever.
We have on occasion, and sometimes, I would say more of that is just sometimes somebody's complaining that, oh, so-and-so's next to them is too loud as they're watching DVDs or something.
Or their headphones are too loud. I feel like that's the more common.
But I will add to this that we're not monitoring, we're not policing what people are doing on the internet or with the machines. I mean, and so it's important to understand that we try our best to protect people's privacy while using the machines. I think, this protects you from things happening, such as somebody complaining, I'm sitting next to this person and they're looking at inappropriate material. And so then if they came to us and did that, we would
Have a procedure.
probably ask the person to cease and desist until we could review what they were looking at. And, it could be appropriate, it could not be appropriate. But, other than that, we aren't monitoring what people are doing.
And you're not, when you say until you can review what they are looking at, is there some record of URLs where you could separately, from looking at the screen, see where somebody has?
Yeah, we can, nothing is, nothing
nothing's
is
private.
gone once you look at it, but, and I go back to my former job in Glendale, where on the occasion that happened, then we would have to get advice from our attorneys as to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate. And if it was illegal, obviously, then the enforcement component of this comes into play. I think we're very fortunate in Altadena that this has not happened, but it could happen.
For Forewarned
so
is
it's better-
forearmed.
Yeah, it's better to protect yourself.
Thank you.
Well, and so just to kind of follow on from Betsy's question, I guess, I wanna understand a little bit better what the trigger mechanism is on any of this enforcement. So would it come into play if there were another patron who complained, or if a staff member saw something questionable? Are those pretty much the two trigger mechanisms?
Yes,
Okay.
in my mind, they're the only mechanisms.
Okay, so there's not like any kind of review or
No.
algorithms,
No.
okay, great, cool.
And then my question is almost unrelated, but as I read through this, it talked about patrons unable to borrow items from the library due to excess charges on their library account. And it occurred to me, some of the mechanics I'm still figuring out about how it all works. Charges on a library account these days wouldn't be fines or whatever it be, they didn't turn in their book, or they're still holding materials, right?
Yeah, and actually, we had some debate on that one, because I think that's like saying to somebody, just because you have fines, you can't use the library, or you can't look at a book on the shelf, because that's virtually what you're doing by going to the internet. So there is a loophole here. If you have fines and, on your card, the system will disallow you from using the machine, but you can get a guest pass to go on the internet. Because we do not want to disallow someone from coming in and pulling a book off the shelf, just like we don't want to disallow anybody from looking at information on the internet.
Okay. All right, any more discussion? So that vote is, that the motion's still on the floor. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Hi.
All right, and that motion carries. Thanks, Cindy. The next is really an informational item, right?
That one's Nicholas.
It is informational, but I am glad that we're talking about it because of what Mark brought up earlier and Jason's question about how much we do contribute per employee. So we're in the midst of open enrollment. It began on September 9th and it ends on October 4th, and this is the opportunity that staff have to change their health plan for next year. It goes into effect January 1st. And there's a chart here that shows the percentage increase for every health plan that is available to staff, and you'll see that most of them did increase. There were only a couple that didn't go up, and some of them actually increased quite significantly. So like I mentioned, it is $500 per employee, and the last time it was changed was either 2014 or 15. The previous director came on board and saw that it was only $450 per employee and wanted to increase it to $500 per employee. However, as Mark said, we're not legally required to pay retiree health premiums, but we are contractually obligated through our CalPERS contract to do that. So currently, we do pay $500 for all active employees and for all retired employees.
Say that again, sorry, just to clarify. So we are obligated because of our PERS contract. That's
Yes.
what obligates us to pay for retirement health care.
Yes.
Okay.
And anytime we adjust the premium, because of the way our contract is, it increases for both current staff and for retirees. The amount is the same.
Okay.
And do you recall our liability on the retiree?
Not the exact figure, but it's a lot.
It's a substantial amount.
So while I would love to increase the premium, the way our contract is set up, it increases for everybody every time we do that, and it's a significant amount.
When you say increase the premium, you're just talking about these rates in this sheet.
I mean the $500 premium that we contribute. So we only
Oh,
pay
so whatever
$500
we raised for current employees, we have to do the same for the
for
retirees.
retirees. Yes.
Unless we change the contract with CalPERS.
We would have to do a contract amendment.
Okay, dumb question, just because I've never worked for the government, so I don't know how this works. So basically, whatever healthcare plan you have, the library kicks in $500 and the employee pays whatever the balance is, right? Okay. Got it. That's a lot.
I don't know what PERS is doing, but some of these rates are
These
insane
are wild.
for single employees.
I have a question that I should know. How many retirees are on that payroll for us?
That's a good question. I think currently I have 14.
14, okay.
What's the average annual increase piece on this? I mean, are we seeing, like, at what point do we have to kick up the amount that we're contributing? Do you know what I mean? Like, because if it's going up consistently every year, like,
This increase is actually quite a bit more than it was last year,
okay.
to be honest. These couple plans that went up like 13%, 18%, those are huge jumps compared to last year.
Do you think, and who knows, right, but do you get the impression that that is an adjustment that was made because it hasn't been adjusted in a while, or does that reflect the instability of the insurance market, or like what's your feel on whether we're gonna see a repeat of that next year?
I would say it's a little bit of both. And yeah, based on the history, I say it will keep increasing. I don't know that it will be as drastic, but yeah, every year.
We'll see what happens in November.
Are there more questions?
I guess I don't understand why this requires action on our part.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Oh, this is information, so review and file just means just
Yeah.
that. Okay, got it.
Thank you, Nicole.
Sure. Thank you.
So the next item is related to a request to close the library for partial day, both libraries for partial day on November 4th. As was mentioned, we're continuing the strategic planning process, and a workshop with the entire staff to follow up on what we worked on last week is scheduled for Monday, November 4th. So this is requesting closure from 10 to 1:30 at both Main and Bob Lucas. Main is normally open until 9, from 10 to 9, and Bob Lucas is normally open until 6.
So that November 3rd, which is a Sunday, right, was just a typo, so 4th is the day we're talking about.
November 3rd was yeah, this is Monday. November 3rd, did I say 3? We were talking about
No, I
that.
don't know, I thought maybe the 3rd was a Sunday.
But we were talking about the 3rd because it's a community.
That's a community committee, yeah, so.
Town hall.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't impact anything,
Okay.
yeah.
Should say November 4th on the agenda.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the agenda is
okay.
incorrect.
All right, so the motion then would be to approve a partial closure for November the 4th then, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion?
Just, that's a very propitious day, November 4th, because
Yeah,
that's
a lot happened.
Nikki's first day.
That's right.
So all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries.
When it gets out in the community, they're closing half the day because of you.
It's like a holiday.
Now we're to a review and approval of the updated library rules of behavior.
Okay, once again, in my review of our policies, we do not have a code of conduct that has been really effective, and giving the staff the tools that they need when there's inappropriate behavior going on. And this is not to say all of these behaviors have been happening, it's just to say that, if they were, the staff would have something to fall back on in terms of discussing whatever the issue was with the patron. So, it covers illegal activity, it covers damage to library property, it covers misuse of library property, things like leaving children under the age of 9 unattended, offensive odors, can be an issue in a library as well, partially clothed people, consuming food, all of those things that can happen in a library and sometimes does. And once again, this gives the staff the tools that they need if they need to discuss something with a patron or a customer. This also includes the same enforcement processes that I mentioned with the other policy, with the internet policy, the computer use policy, and a related appeal process. This also, it's already taken for granted that our monitor has the authority to escort people from the building. He has been known to do that, but most of the time, most situations that I've heard of, it's only been for a one-day exclusion. But anybody that is excluded from the library, now or in the future, has the opportunity to appeal whatever
does that appeal process work?
To the district director.
Okay.
Okay, can we get a motion to approve this, and then we can discuss it?
So moved. I'll second.
Okay, been moved and seconded to approve these updated rules of behavior for the library. Is there any discussion?
I have a question. How often do people come in with service animals? Does that happen?
It happened just the other day. I don't think as frequently as in some places, but it does happen.
I've just started to notice in hotels and other places that a new thing that I'm starting to see posted is that they're requiring certification of service animals.
My understanding is that's illegal.
Oh, interesting.
That we cannot ask. I mean, we can ask if it's a service animal or a support dog, and Stella was explaining this as a support or service.
Yeah, so like therapy, emotional support, those are not condoned, but a service animal such as a not a canine dog, a dog that helps somebody who needs vision, or who helps somebody with diabetes or something, those are legitimate animals that can be brought in. But it's very categorized, those are only dogs, and miniature horses are actually deemed service animals. Whereas emotional support animals, therapy animals, those are not, yeah, those are not allowed. But that's where it's tricky because you can't actually ask somebody. So,
Yeah.
Well, you can ask what service the animal performs, technically. So like, they can say, well, it responds this way if I'm gonna have a seizure. You know what I mean? But you can't require them to show you certification. But if they divulge that it's an emotional support animal, that doesn't fall under the ADA law.
My other question, number 14 jumped out at me about leaving children under the age of 9 unattended. Is there, at South Pasadena Library, it's posted on the door when you walk in that children under 11 have to have an adult with them to come in the building. This seems more like, you know, you can't necessarily just drop your kid off at the children's room and then go off and use a computer. Do we have a policy about children coming to the library without an adult as far as an age?
I mean, this is the only policy we have to put into that.
Okay.
Specifically unattended child
Yeah.
policy.
Well, yeah, and it's derived from the policy that we have for unattended children.
I'm sorry, what is it?
I mean, we have another policy that pretty much states this.
Okay.
That's been in place for quite a while.
Okay. So theoretically, a 9-year-old child could be dropped off at the library and come in the door and
Any child under 9.
could not, but a 9-year-old could.
Yes, theoretically.
Okay.
And I should say, not necessarily related to that item, but these were all reviewed by the B&K as well.
I just have one other. 16 about changing diapers.
Yes,
Is that a problem, or has that been a problem of people changing diapers?
Not that I'm aware of, but it's related to
hygiene.
They're nodding.
It has it. I mean,
infrequently.
now that we have the changing tables in the restroom, I don't think it's been as much of a problem, but before we did not, and there was really no choice.
Yeah, what could you do if you didn't have anywhere else to
Yeah,
change?
and, I mean, I have empathy for those parents, because I have put my child on the floor of Target once because they were not, the bathrooms weren't in service. But, they used to have like a pad, if you remember, the foam pad, children's had like a foam pad parents could use. But now that Jonathan thankfully has installed the changing tables in the restroom, I don't think it's been an issue. But, you know, could be.
I had heard that it was before that too, so I just wondered if that solved the problem, and it sounds like it did.
How much do headphones cost? It's $2. Okay, I was just curious. It got mentioned in the other policy too, and I was like, is it cheaper than on the plane?
Well, I mean, I think what we discussed was if somebody really needs headphones, we're just
Just
gonna
give it to 'em, right?
earbuds, and we're gonna give them to them.
Good, okay.
Cindy, did you say how long it's been since this has been updated?
I'll look to Stella and everyone else for that one. It was never this comprehensive.
That's, yeah, that's one of the reasons, yes, that's one of the reasons why we want to bring this much more comprehensive. The behavioral policy that we have right now is very, very skeletal. And,
At best.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a major redo of it, which is great. I'm so glad you're paying attention to it and getting it done. But it also seems like something that should be reviewed maybe once a year for, to Betsy's point about the age limit for dropping off kids and stuff. I mean, it looks really comprehensive, but when you think about it for a long time, stuff I'm sure will bubble up. So just a thought, I guess, not asking for anything. Any other conversation? Okay, so the motion is on the floor to approve the behavior policy for the library. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that motion carries. Now we're on to the review of facilities use with Christmas Tree Lane. And thank you so much, you two, for staying through the meeting. I'm sure you found it scintillating as we did. And I guess I'd like an explanation, I guess, or overview from you, Cindy, and you're certainly invited to talk a little bit about what's going on.
So we've had a long-standing and such a positive relationship with the Christmas Tree Lane Association, but like everything, we need to think sometimes about the agreements that we have between ourselves and organizations, especially when they have yearly events that attract, tens of thousands of people. I haven't been to one, but, and they use our parking lot. This year, we're very fortunate that they have graciously extended the opportunity to have tree lighting on our property, which is going to be fantastic, so thank you very much. But nevertheless, I thought it was important that we have an agreement between us and the Christmas Tree Lane Association and ensure that they were covered with insurance that was necessary if something were to happen. And I'm told from the several meetings I've had with Tony and Scott that you haven't had any incidents, which you're very fortunate, but nevertheless, we felt that it was necessary to have some kind of agreement in place. They also, Christmas Tree Lane Association Board also meets in our library once a month, free of charge, obviously, but that is incorporated into this agreement as well. This agreement was drafted based on the criteria that I gave them. This was drafted by BB&K. Christmas Tree Lane Association folks had reviewed it, and at the last meeting were okay with everything in it. And they provided their insurance documents to us as well, which are included in this package. So with that, if you would like to add anything to what I've already said, you are welcome.
Nobody wants to.
Well, my name is Scott Wardlaw, and I'm the current president of Christmas Tree Lane Association. And Tony Ward here is the former president and current vice president. And Lane Foreman, he's in charge of all the logistics of making what we're talking about doing together here happen. So he's the voice of experience here. But we're hoping that this is satisfactory to you, and it will work for both of us, we hope, because we're both organizations that serve the community in different capacities. We were approached actually by somebody from the library many years ago who suggested this idea, and we run on a shoestring budget. We live off the donations of those who choose to give them to us. But we're expanding now. Our budget is bigger, our funding is better, and now we're able to do this. So we're proposing buying the materials that we need, making the lines. We make all of our own lines, and are hoping for the participation of volunteers from the library in the creation of those lines. And we can, Tony or we can later explain to you how that works. But we would do it on a Sunday in your parking lot since you're not open. And we need to wrap wires together, slap them across the library parking lot so that they hold together, just twisted wires, and then put the sockets and so on and so forth, the plug-ins on, so that they can accept the bulbs that we're going to use to light the trees. And we're proposing the 3 trees, I think that's clear, on the lot. And I think that's just about it. We're hoping that we've complied with everything that you require, and I think we've spelled out what we need as far as being able to go forward on it.
Okay.
Right. And one of the stipulations was that we were going to supply our person that places our pulleys at the tops of the trees for this, because it's a rope and pulley operation. We do all of the 155, I guess, trees on the lane, and it's a state historic landmark, but things change every year. We need to place the pulleys higher, or place them in different positions, and we have a person that does that for us, but my understanding now is that you will be supplying the person that does that.
Yeah, we're in the process of getting volunteers.
But other than that, that's what we are hoping to get accomplished.
Okay, great, thank you for that.
I would like to add one note. There is the legend of Christmas Tree Lane, and this is a private, small group here. People ask how the lights are strung in the trees, and you're officially required to let people know the elves do it.
Great, thank you for your comments, and I think rather than get the motion on the floor right away, there might be some discussion about this, so why don't we start with that? If you're available for a few minutes to answer any questions we have, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand everything. So this agreement just covers our 3 trees and then the ongoing use of library facilities by the association and the parking lot, the day that we do the lighting, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is the library going to be open this year during the lighting?
We traditionally have not opened the library because of the volume of traffic that comes through. I mean, we do open the library for the volunteers so that they can use the restroom, and I think we had the community room open in prior years, just as kind of a staging area. But we have not opened it, at least in recent time. I'm looking at everyone else who was here last year, in recent time to the general public. And I mean, how many people show up for those events?
Well, in not that many years past, it was typically, and I'm going with what Tony has told me before my time, I've only been involved for about 10 years now, but prior to that, there were 1,500 to 3,000 people, varied. But the sheriff's department estimated that our crowds these last couple of years have been between 7,000 and 9,000 people.
That's what I thought, close to 10.
So it's grown.
And they bring porta potties, my understanding is they bring porta potties into our parking lot for bathroom facilities, which is nice, a nice amenity.
I was told that our plumbing couldn't take it, and that's why we're not open.
Totally believe that. No, I mean, I remember last year was bananas. There were some, and I know it's going to get more and more because we're 99 this year, and next year is going to be off the charts.
Well,
So
my understanding is that the facilities here have been open only to the volunteers and people working.
Great, okay.
Not to the public at large. We have porta potties for them.
Perfect. Okay, great. That is, I just wanted to make sure I understood. Oh, and sign me up when we do lines. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, done.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I'm good.
Yeah, there was a post I saw recently that you can't call yourself an Altadenan if you haven't volunteered.
I've got to do
Christmas.
this.
Huh?
I got to do this.
Okay.
We'll make it happen, Bridget. We'll show you on a Sunday.
Somebody else did my tree.
Just a couple of questions from me, and we can get this into a motion on the floor. But just regarding safety a little bit, you're going on 100 years now with this, right? Is that how long it's been going
Our
on?
centennial is 2020.
Yeah. So I just wonder, I mean, you must have refined the process, especially the safety end of it, 100 times over by now. But I wonder, does the county get involved with any kind of inspection or anything about what you're doing every year? Or does he kind of let you kind of run with it?
There is a formal process for closing the street and working in the public right-of-way. The library property is an exception because there's a separate tax issue that separates the duties or responsibilities between the county public works and the library system here in Altadena. So the agreement that I believe has been drafted is not specific. It is sort of general into what contributions and donations the Christmas Tree Lane would provide and the services that would be exchanged with the library. There's always been just a handshake over the years that I've been involved since with the library and Christmas Tree Lane, and this dates back to the mid-1990s. And so Cindy was formalizing, an agreement, legal-wise. And so that's, for the most part, what we were trying to do, rather than being too specific. We've never had any accidents that anyone was seriously injured other than a hangnail or a twisted ankle or something. So the liability insurance that we have is reasonable for the rates we have to pay. And then we recently implemented volunteers insurance to cover any potential injuries that occur in the future. So we are pretty careful about safety, and it's been pretty successful that way. So I am not so much concerned because I haven't seen too much in the past that would cause much harm. But I believe our insurance policies should cover our activities. Should anyone get injured or attempt to sue the library or its board for activities that we have instigated and someone became injured.
Thanks for that information. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add to that when we went to Cal Nonprofits Insurance, who found the insurance for us, we described what we did. They came out, they know just what our operation is, and so they found the policy that would fit our needs for the specific work that we do on the line. So I think it seems sufficient, and you have reviewed it and agreed with that. So.
Yeah, we have. My question was simply if the county got involved in that in an inspection kind of way, but you've answered the question. Thank you very much for that, and thanks for volunteering the fact that you haven't had any accidents to speak of. That makes us feel better right away. The other question, not safety related, is regarding volunteerism and so on. Have you already kind of integrated into our system, or have you in the past, and I'm not aware of it, we've got that track it forward system where people can list their volunteer hours, and UNI is the one that sets that up and tracks it and so on. Is there a connection that way with us and the volunteer effort?
Not at this time.
Okay. That's something that might be attractive to kids that are always trying to get their volunteer hours, et cetera, with your projects.
Although with the lighting of our trees, we're going to have volunteer opportunities available that UNI will coordinate.
Okay.
Regarding the volunteers, we do have children, very small, and then of course high schoolers, and the high schoolers get community credits for high school.
Yeah, my daughter was part of that, so I know the drill on that, yeah. All right.
Let me just say we're really excited to have our trees included. This is so great. It's just one of the most special things that happens every year. And so thank you so much for wrapping us in a formal way, and please pass on to your board and all of your volunteers how much we appreciate everything that you guys do.
Well, very good, and I wanted to thank you too for working with us. And I I especially wanted to thank Jonathan, because he was a great liaison between your group and our group, telling us just what was required and helping us get that done.
Fantastic, thank you, John.
Yeah, I feel like we're part of the land of enchantment now, being part of this whole thing, so it really is a good feeling. All right, no more discussion. Do I have a motion then to approve this contract?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Second, all right. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks so much, you two, for coming and talking to us about that. All right, moving on. The next is J, and that's approval of resolution 2019-10, authorizing an amendment to the CalPERS contract. Oh, I kept looking at you. Okay.
Oh, no, wait, sorry. So we've talked about this the last couple months. We did the resolution of intention to amend the contract at last month's meeting. So this is the final resolution authorizing the amendment to the CalPERS contract, as well as the certification of final action of governing body and the official final amendment to contract that I have for signature. And this is to remove the exclusion of custodian from our original contract. So you'll see in the final draft of the contract that it no longer says custodian. That position has been removed. So currently there only remains page, gardener, and library clerk 1 as excluded positions.
All right, why don't we get this as in the form of a motion? Is there a motion to approve this?
Yep, so moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second, so is there any discussion about this now?
Just do it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
And I do have a clean copy
Okay.
for you guys, the various documents.
I only have one question about this that's bugged me for a long time, and that is, are these positions that are excluded, are they just things that are individual to us, or is there sort of a recommendation or something that's out there about this?
It's very common, especially in every library system that I've worked for. Any position that is less than 20 hours per week is excluded from a CalPERS contract,
Okay.
and that's a CalPERS rule that you have to work 988 hours or more per year.
Okay.
However, there are other retirement organizations that will cover part-time people. And so when you go through the HR process, that's something that you might consider.
Great. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve this. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. So, the next is, who's on track here? Are we on L?
It's the certification, so is that, do they need to go on?
Okay, gotcha. So that's K, right?
It's K, it should be M.
It would be M, yes.
Okay.
I don't know that you guys have to go on the certification.
So, is this another, are you gonna present this again, Nicole?
I don't think that that one requires, well, to say final action.
Yeah, so, same thing.
It needs a signature. I don't know that it
CalPERS
needs
is
a vote.
very particular. So CalPERS provided the resolution for the amendment and then certification of final action, which also is talking about the vote and the resolution and all that. So if you just want to vote for the certification of the contract amendment, that would be awesome.
It's kind of like two documents on the same subject then, basically. Okay.
They want to make sure you're really sure you know.
Really mean it.
All right.
You really mean it.
All right, move to certify.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's official.
I feel like we've taken 6 votes on this.
We've taken, because we did the preliminary one, the intent, we voted on this like a million times.
Okay. But we're done with it
No
now.
going back now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're really sure.
All right, the updated trustees calendar.
Okay, so We updated the trustees calendar for business. Nicole said that the a regular review of the investment policy should have been on the calendar. So that would happen in June. And so that was the only change. We just added that all the way at the bottom there. The last thing in June says review investment policy. So that would just be an agenda item. That would be coming to the board in June.
Okay, is there a motion then to approve this amended trustee calendar?
So moved.
I'll second
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
it. Aye.
We're done with that. Thank you very much. And are there any comments on for proposed future agenda item, anything in correspondence that anybody wants to point out to us here? No? So I would go to 11 then, proposed future agenda items.
Can I just have one comment on the correspondence?
Sure.
I think on the CSDA, I think it's they call it the ACA 1. This is the potential ballot measure for next year to lower the threshold. I know we already sent the letter
You sent them a letter
on that,
already.
right?
Yep.
But they're asking for calls and additional emails. I would just encourage board members to take some personal action as well on that.
Do you have some additional insight on that then, Jason? I mean, what are you hearing?
They're just, I mean, I'm just reading this and it seems like they're requesting some additional communication just to make sure they get the votes. So I don't know how, maybe they're just not terribly confident, I'm not sure.
I know at one point recently, they said it was not moving forward. But this is the most recent. Yeah, this is for September. So maybe things have changed.
Well, because it requires 2/3 of the vote.
All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that one.
I'll certainly take a look at what the current state of that is and be prepared to talk about it at the next meeting.
I had a quick question about this.
Take action. Do all of you receive this email from CSTA? No? Okay. So would it be helpful for me to forward it to you all just when it comes in?
I think Outlook dumps it into the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's real
Then
easy
not-
for us not to see it because it goes to a separate kind of box.
Okay. Yeah. If it comes from me, it should not go in your junk
Your emails
because you
are-
know me.
Oh,
Outlook, if you've talked to someone before, it shouldn't go in your junk. So yeah, I will just forward
thank you.
it when it comes in.
Yeah, that'd be great, because if you send something, we'll open it, but it is
I have
otherwise.
hundreds of CSDA emails.
I don't, I delete them frequently. I feel like they're really cluttering up our electronic record retention process. Future agenda items, just so, I mean, obviously we'll have it on there, but in October, kind of like clear some mental space for strategic plan draft review, so that'll take some time, and, you know, we will, obviously have it in the packet, but we'll wanna spend some time talking about changes or additions or revisions or whatever that you guys would like to make, so sort of mentally prepare for that.
Okay. Anything else? All right, can I get a motion then to adjourn?